I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order then. If we're ready to go, I'm just taking one last look for faces, and I think we're good. All right. So I'll start by just reading quickly the statement. Back on April 6th, City Council adopted Emergency Ordinance TO 20-12, which allows for the school board to meet electronically in order to address continuity of operations associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. Our electronic meetings will still be open to the public. There will be an opportunity for the public to submit public comments to be read at the meeting, and all meeting notices will be posted on the FCCPS website with the agendas available in advance on board docs. Ms. Goodell, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Dr. Anderson.
Here.
Dr. Dimick? Not here. Ms. Downs?
Here.
Ms. Litton?
Here.
Ms. Russell? Not here yet. And Mr. Webb?
Here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And please rise and join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. I would seek a motion regarding tonight's agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move the agenda be accepted as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Is there a second?
Second.
Heard simultaneous. I think I heard Ms. Litton, so I'll say thank you, Ms. Litton, and Ms. Goodell.
Okay, Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Dimick? Someone here. Ms. Downs?
Here. I mean, yes.
Ms. Litton?
Yes.
Ms. Russell? Okay, and Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll now move on to our item 2.01, public comments. And while the state of emergency remains in effect due to COVID-19, written statements may be submitted to the clerk for dissemination to board members. Public comments will be read into the record for a period of 30 minutes or until all submitted comments are read, whichever comes first. And in accordance with school board policy BDDH, the time for each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Please send written statements to our school board clerk, Marty Goodell, at goodellm@fccps.org. Public comments received by 10 a.m. on the day of the meeting will be posted on board docs prior to the meeting. Ms. Goodell.
Yes, hi. So we have 3 that came in before the 10 o'clock cutoff. The first is from Andy Rankin, and he writes, at the last meeting, there was a strong support for bringing back special education students for in-person instruction as soon as circumstances and science allows. Can you please provide details about what the necessary circumstances are? What is being measured or evaluated, and what results are we looking for in order to make the decision to bring special education students back? How are the parameters for bringing back special education students different from those being looked at for bringing back the general education students? My concern is that we are not being logical about how we assess the risk associated with bringing back a very small number of students and staff. We previously made plans to restart school in a hybrid model when the virus was still active in the community. Presumably, the expectation wasn't that the hybrid model would ensure nobody ever caught the virus at school, but rather would limit the chance of catching the virus at school and, more importantly, greatly reduce the risk of the virus spreading extensively. With that in mind, the chances of significant spread of the virus as a result of having a handful of special education students back at school is extremely low. With proper precautions, the risk of any individual catching the virus as a result of having a small number of kids in school is also small. If we have decided to take a zero risk approach, we should be clear about that and declare school will be virtual until 100% vaccine coverage can be achieved, however long that takes. Thank you, Andy Rankin. The next is regarding flexibility for online learning from Jared Anderson. I appreciate all the effort the teachers and administrators are putting into the planning for the upcoming school year, but I think the approach being taken as it has been relayed so far is confused and is trying to maintain a stance of changing as little as possible. Why are we still starting on August 24th, especially since every other surrounding school district has realized that a pandemic is sufficient reason for adjusting the schedule is beyond me. A later start date would allow for better preparation. We should also dispense with the pretense that the school day should proceed exactly like it would at the school. The school board has adopted the policy of virtual education, and they should own it and all its implications. The time at home should be treated like government-supported homeschool because that's what it will be. Particularly for the younger students, the parents will be the teachers for the foreseeable future, and any plan should reflect that fact. Many kids will be home with working parents who must get work done and who will be able to fit in their child's instruction around their work schedules. Yet there has been little to no information relayed that seems to have taken working parents' schedules into account. Please plan the curriculum, the materials, and the schedule with these issues in mind and actually support parents in educating their children rather than trying to replicate school in the home. Here are some suggestions. Instead of being dead set against pods or raising equity concerns when criticizing them, perhaps FCCPS should support those families who are able to form pods. You already implicitly accepted this when previously considering allowing those students who quarantine together to ride the bus together, while also instituting pods based at the appropriate schools for students from lower income families and or students with special needs. From what I understand, you have decided to provide care for teachers K through 8 kids, which is great. So it's not as if in-person interaction with students is not happening. It's just not happening with Falls Church students. You can just add to the child care roster those students for whom equity concerns are an issue and increase child care staff accordingly. The number of sessions children are required to be in should scale with age, i.e. minimal for Mount Daniel students with increasing with the age of the student. For example, for lower grades, where it will be most difficult to have children engage on their own, you can have short morning meeting and then have one small group meeting later in the day that kids need to attend. This should also take into account any special needs the student might have. Any core instruction, math, language, science, etc., should be pre-recorded and not introduced in live instruction time. This would aid parents in effectively educating their younger kids and would be a better pedagogical strategy for older students. With each lesson, teachers can also provide parents with a set of common mistakes that children make and provides specific correction instructions, i.e. when the child does Y, the parent should say X. Some of these ideas may have already been considered, but since the communication has not been very clear on requirements for when children will be online.
Marty, that's 3 minutes for this comment.
Thank you. And the last one is from Pamela Crum. She says, Dear Ms. Goodell, I would like this read at the school board meeting as a public comment. On July 23rd, the school board approved Dr. Noonan's recommendation to abandon the previously communicated hybrid plan for an entirely online model. According to the Virginia Governor's Plan, Phase 3 allows all students to receive in-person instruction. Phase 3 also allows a wide variety of activities that seem much less essential to our communities than in-person education, yet those continue while school districts are abandoning in-person education in the fall. Dr. William Hanaj, Harvard professor of public health, goes so far as to suggest that schools should be a priority in reopening instead of businesses due to their importance in the community. We hear Dr. Anthony Fauci, the CDC, the American Pediatrics Association, leaders in education and public health all support schools reopening for in-person learning, stressing to proceed with caution and making safety a priority by using appropriate mitigation measures similar to those implemented at essential workplaces. A FCCPS teacher recently wrote a thoughtful and comprehensive opinion piece in the Washington Post, describing many of the challenges of socially distanced education. However, the piece did not provide suggested solutions. FCCPS has an exceptionally talented and intelligent staff and a similar community supporting it. I feel confident we have the ability to institute creative and safe alternatives that would allow our students to attend school in person at least part of the time going forward. Further, the July 9th edition of the Falls Church News Press showed that 76% of our community favors either a full or partial return to school. It seems eminently possible to develop a model which more closely resembles these preferences. FCCPS does not have to reinvent the wheel. There are models and guidelines to schools reopening. Health economist Emily Oster at Brown University and the governor of Connecticut, among others, have established guidelines. In our own state, the Virginia Beach City Public Schools leaders have adopted a plan that is being referred to as the blueprint model for school systems in the state of Virginia, as well as across the country. Might this be difficult? Absolutely. But the 51st anniversary of the moon landing just a few weeks ago reminds us of President Kennedy's response to those who said going to the moon was too difficult. In quotes, we should choose to go to the moon in this decade and do other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept. Nothing has happened in the last 22 weeks to get our students back to school. Continuing to hope for something to change is not a strategy. It is up to us to make a strategy to open schools, a strategy that will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Please ask Dr. Noonan and the staff to lead us in developing that strategy. Thank you, Pamela Crum. And that's it.
Thanks very much, Ms. Goodell. Just again, reminding everybody in the community, we do read every one of these comments and respond as much as we possibly can in person, but also certainly we hear this input and we listen to it in our meetings and make sure that your voices are heard through our meetings. So thank you very much for writing in. The next item on our agenda is a closed meeting, and I would entertain a motion regarding the closed meeting. Ms. Litton.
Mr. Chair, pursuant to the the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, I move that the board convene a closed meeting for the following purpose: to discuss or consider the identified subject matter. Personnel under section 2.2-3711A1, in particular, staff appointments, staff reassignments, staff resignations, staff retirements, staff performance, staff change in position, staff termination, dependent care leave, long-term medical leave, childcare leave requests, leave of absence, and student matters under section 2.23711A2 concerning any student or any resident school system, and the student matters under section 2.23711A2, student tuition waiver under policy 9.21, anticipated residence, and discussion of the award of public contract involving the expenditure of public funds, including interviews of bidder or offerers and discussion of the terms or the scope of such contract, where discussion in an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body, pursuant to section 2.23711A29, in particular, a contract for school renaming consultant.
Thank you, Ms. Litton. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Ms. Goodell.
Yes, Dr. Anderson,
Yes.
Dr. Dimick,
Yes.
thank you. Ms. Downs,
Yes.
Ms. Litton,
Yes.
Ms. Russell,
Yes.
thank you, and Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Thank you, and the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My estimate is this might take something in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 minutes, I would guess, based on the things that I know of on the agenda. Dr. Noonan, does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
Okay, so thank you. I'm seeing faces I haven't seen in a while, so it's great to see you all. We will be back as soon as we're done in our closed meeting, and thank you for your patience, and we'll be right back. All right, why don't we go ahead and move forward here. I would seek a motion for reconvening to open. Ms. Downs.
Chair Anderson, I move that the board reconvene to open meeting.
Thank you very much, Ms. Downs. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Litton. Ms. Goodell, please call the roll.
Yes, Dr. Anderson,
Yes.
Dr. Dimick,
Yes.
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
Ms. Litton,
Yes.
Ms. Russell,
Yes.
and Mr. Webb.
Yes.
All right, thank you. We have reconvened to open session, and now I would seek a motion certifying our closed meeting. Dr. Dimick.
Whereas the Falls Church City School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.2-3711B of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Falls Church City School Board hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you, Dr. Dimick. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Ms. Cadeau?
Yes, Dr. Anderson,
Yes.
Dr. Dimick,
Yes.
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
Ms. Litton,
Yes.
Ms. Russell,
Yes.
and Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So moving on then to item 5 on our agenda would be recognitions and reports, but I don't believe we have any tonight. So then we'll move on to item 6 on our agenda for tonight, the consent agenda. And normally, of course, we can do this by consent, but during our special meeting rules, we'll do a roll call vote. So I would seek a motion on the consent agenda. Ms. Downs.
Chair Anderson, I move that the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Dimick. And then Ms. Goodell.
Okay, Dr. Anderson,
Yes.
Dr. Dimick,
Yes.
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
Ms. Litton,
Yes.
Ms. Russell,
Yes.
and Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Thank you, and the motion passes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. So now we will move on to our business items for tonight. And I am very pleased that our very first business item is our appointment of our school board student representative for the 2020-2021 school year. And Dr. Noonan, I don't know if you or Mr. Hills has any comments that we want to make at this point. So I figured I would ask.
I'd be happy to begin, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Hills, as he's been integral in helping us move Ms. Snyder's position forward. I just want to personally take a second to say congratulations to you, Elizabeth. We're really excited to have you become part of our team. It's a very unique opportunity, I think, for a student to sit on a school board, not only in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but across the United States. And the voice that you bring to our team is one that's going to be very important. So I would invite you to be as open and as transparent and as honest as you can be, to again share with us sort of the student voice, because you do represent the students at George Mason, and I just know you're gonna do a great job. So thank you for doing this and agreeing to do it. And Mr. Hills, if you have anything you'd like to add.
No, absolutely. I just want to echo the statement made by Dr. Noonan. Elizabeth, you're a perfect choice for us. You embody everything it means to be a Mustang. When I think about the number of extracurriculars you're involved in, it's something we joked about as part of your interview. Is there anything that you don't do at George Mason High School? I feel like you belong to almost every club. And so we're excited that you're really going to be an important student voice for us. Elizabeth has served as an intricate member of our student admin team, and she definitely advocates on behalf of her student body. So congratulations, Elizabeth. It's really great to have you on board.
Well, thanks very much, Dr. Noonan and Mr. Hills. Thanks very much for that. And I don't know if anybody on the board would like to make any comments before we take formal action on this. Ms. Russell.
So I just want to say congratulations, Elizabeth. I think this is so fantastic. And I think this is especially special for me just because since I've known you since you were a kindergartner, and to see what a fantastic young woman that you've grown into. And I just know that you're going to do fantastic things for our board. And we're so grateful to have you here, and look forward to not only what you're going to do for the board, but also to see what fantastic things are in your future and beyond. So congratulations.
Thank you very much, Ms. Russell. Mr. Webb.
I just want to echo that and just congratulate you, Elizabeth, on your appointment to this. It's always good to have a student representing the student voice that we don't get to hear very often. They rarely come before us, so it's always good to know that we have someone in the building, and in this case, potentially virtually, a little bit more so than norm, but having that voice shared with us is always a good voice to hear, and look forward to working with you in this Zoom world for a little while. So, but hopeful that we will be in person meeting soon.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Any other members? Otherwise, I've got a comment I can make too, which I guess I will go ahead, not seeing any other hands, and say, Elizabeth, congratulations. And it is really wonderful to have you coming on board as a student representative. I can't emphasize enough how much we really want you to speak up and share your perspective and the perspective of your fellow students, and help us hear what's in the minds of the students as we go through everything that we do. It's absolutely critical, and you know, it's hard sometimes for us to have that good insight, and so we really want to make sure that that we have it. So please speak up, and I have a habit of going and asking everybody, you know, when we're physically in a room and we can go around the table as it is, but on the Zoom, I'll be looking for faces. And so please speak up, please say whatever you need to say, and we want to hear it for sure. So, and congratulations. So with that, we actually have a motion that I will be happy to entertain.
I move that the school board appoint Elizabeth Snyder as the school board student representative for the 2020-2021 school year.
Thank you, Dr. Dimick. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Litton. Ms. Goodell?
Yes. Dr. Anderson,
Yes.
Dr. Dimick,
Yes.
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
Ms. Litton,
Yes.
Ms. Russell,
Yes.
and Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Thank you, and the motion passes, and congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I look forward to working with you all.
Fabulous. All right, so that is great news, and I'm really happy about that. I really am. So we're now going to move to our next business item, 7.02, which is an update on back to school. And Dr. Noonan is taking a picture. Everybody wave for the picture. All right.
I
Dr.
wanted to
Noonan,
get the
thank you.
moment captured when Elizabeth was officially named. So
Absolutely.
we'll put it out on Twitter and make sure everybody knows that you're our new rep. So thank you, Chair Anderson. I appreciate the opportunity tonight to share an update of where we are. This evening, it's going to be a verbal update, and just to kind of frame our remarks a little bit, just to give you a sense of where we're going. I have a number of things that I want to cover just to kind of give you some general updates. And then I have invited with us tonight, and you can look around and you know who's here in the room, but we have invited our principals to join us and some other members of the CIA team, along with William and Kristen from operations. So if there are some questions that do come up, we certainly will be happy to entertain those. But I have asked the principals tonight to come and give between a 5 and a 7 minute overview of kind of what to expect when the doors open on August 24th virtually for the students that we serve. And so I'm going to start, and then Marie Baruti from JTP is going to be the first on deck of our principals. So let me just begin by sharing a few updates. First, I want to talk briefly about the new, and just by the way, as I go through my list, I have to go to a different screen, so I can't see you. So if you have something you'd like to say, just give me the what for over audio wise, that would be great. So let me start with the new employee orientation. On Monday, we had our new staff and faculty arrive virtually here in the City of Falls Church Schools. And it is ongoing throughout the week, and it's part of their onboarding process. And I will say I had a really great opportunity at the very beginning of the 2 days so far of their orientation to make a few remarks, and want to thank the chair as well for making some welcoming remarks on behalf of the board. But as I was listening to the conversations the other day, and also to William, Mr. Bates today, it really started to feel a little bit like the school year was beginning, and we're starting to see our new staff and our new faculty come in, and we're talking about things other than COVID and other than the pandemic, which is really quite nice. And it's not a distraction at all. In fact, it's our core work, and we're really excited to get moving on that. But I do want to take a second to thank William and the CIA team, everyone who's on tonight, and also Jeannie Seabridge, who has helped coordinate the 3-day event between multiple key individuals within the school division. The first 2 days have really been great and provided a perfect blend of really focused training, new learning, and reflection. And it's really great to see our division leaders functioning in this role as experts as they support the new professionals through this rigorous onboarding program. And I say rigorous, and it's more than just time. Obviously, they're in their seats for 3 days kind of working through this, but the work that they're going through is really important work, talking about best practices for teaching and learning in an online environment, working through how to work with ELs and special ed students, and all kinds of really important aspects of the work that they do. Thursday of this week, we are really excited to welcome back our full staff. That is actually the first official day back for all staff, albeit it will be virtual, and some will be face-to-face, but through many of our folks are doing their training. We do a lot of our updates and updated training through an online portal and an online program. So many folks will be doing their online portal training throughout the next couple of days on Thursday and Friday, but also our teachers are going to be coming in and setting up their classrooms for a number of reasons. One is we have a lot of our teachers who have indicated that they would like to teach in their classrooms and use that as their sort of virtual studio, which I think is a really great idea because it really brings our kids into the classrooms where they are. And also, in many ways, you know, being able to have a classroom set up and being able to work there, I think provides a level of hope that we are that there is an end in sight, and that at some point in the future we will be back in school. So people will be in classrooms preparing as well. Our convocation, which is our annual event that we host every year at George Mason Auditorium, actually will be done virtually this year. And our theme next Tuesday for our convocation is "It's always the right time to do the right thing." And that is a quote from Martin Luther King. And we really felt like this quote from MLK speaks to our collective values as an organization as we continue to focus and think about our work with respect to equity. And we believe that we can leverage the message to support our work, not only instructionally, not only through equity, but also as we think about our return to face-to-face instruction. We always want to do the right thing and at the right time for the right reasons. And it's always the right time to do the right thing. And so we are going to leverage that key message throughout the year. Professional development is underway, and folks are getting trained in our best practices for teaching and learning and online. And I do want to take a second to thank Julie Macrina, who's on the call tonight, and Jen Santiago, who's also on the call. Seamus O'Connor was a big part of that, and Jen Fessenden, and just want to thank them for their extraordinarily important work to help get our teachers trained up as we enter this new year. Computer swaps have been ongoing over the course of this week and a little bit last week, so all the kids have access to updated software along with MiFis as needed. And I want to thank Dang and his team who have put in hours and hours at our schools working to get the technology up and running, making sure that everything is properly working and charged. And then I also want to thank our social workers as well, who've been working very closely with our families around the needs that they have, specifically with technology, helping get the MiFis out to the people that need them the most and the like. Some of the other things that are happening, this year, and there's a longer story here that I won't go into tonight, but this year we are going to rejoin the USDA National School Lunch Program at Mary Ellen Henderson and George Mason High School. And the reason for that is because we are in a pandemic, we want to be able to ensure that all kids are fed and get access to the EBT debit cards that are coming out through the USDA. Because George Mason and Mary Ellen Henderson were removed from the USDA lunch program previously, we didn't have access to some of the things that we will have access to if we rejoin. So I wanted to let the board know that we are going to rejoin, and again, provides us an opportunity then to get some federal reimbursement for our breakfasts and our lunches that our students receive, particularly those that are on free and reduced meals. And then for the adults, we'll be changing to an a la carte pricing menu to join this program as well. And I want to thank Kristen Michael and Richard Kane for their leadership as well. If the timing is right, at another point in the future for us to come back off of the USDA, we certainly can do that. But we think right now, for the best possible outcomes for our families in the community, we do want to go ahead and get back into the USDA for Henderson and Mason. We recently did another round of gift cards for our families, in addition to our Friday boxes of food that we continue to put out there. And I do want to thank the foundation again, specifically Debbie Hiscott and Cecily Shea for their work, and Suzanne Hadlacki, who's been a huge part of that as well, helping us get those gift cards for our families, so that they can not only have the food that's in the food box that we provide each Friday, but also have an opportunity to go out and buy some other things to supplement what we're providing. HR has continued to process a number of COVID-related leaves of absence, and continues to educate the workforce about what the possibilities are within the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have now a handful of our staff who have asked for a 1-year leave of absence, and those have been granted due to COVID-19. So one of the metrics that, and I'll talk briefly about some metrics and measures later this evening, that we have to look at, that's more of an operational metric, is do we have a workforce? And so being able to hire behind those teachers for 1 year so that we can provide a solid workforce is something that's going to be a challenge for us. But we will continue to work through that. But I did want to let the board know that we did, and the community know that we have had a handful and potentially a handful more of our teachers and staff that have applied for and received a 1-year long leave of absence from our school system due to COVID. Our daycare program has been preparing to offer supervised learning for the school-age children of our employees. And I want to thank Katie Clinton and her team for that. It is an unusual benefit that we are providing to our teachers and staff that no one else in the northern region that I know of is doing. We do feel like in order to provide our teachers the best opportunity to teach our kids, whether it's online or in a face-to-face hybrid solution, we need to provide them with opportunities for daycare. At the end of the day, I consider our teachers essential workers, and we have to, if we want to get school back in session in one way or another, provide those essential workers an opportunity to have some childcare. We are also working to repurpose, and I say that in quotes, staff that will not be working on their regular duties during this time in an effort to support students and our teachers and our families. So for example, we are looking at how our bus drivers, our custodians, and our food service workers can support our efforts to provide childcare for our employees when we are open on the 24th, and assist with preparing for our high school move also, which is coming up. So we have some folks that have agreed to help us do some packing and some moving some things around in preparation for that. And I want to thank Sevi Nancy, Richard, and Kristen for that as well. Continuing to work with our general government partners for solutions for families has been a really important key component to some of the work that we continue to do in the school system. We understand and recognize the complicatedness of being a parent and having 2 full-time parent workers in the home while you're working with school-age children. And so as a consequence of that, we are working very closely to help try to find solutions for those circumstances where someone is perhaps an essential worker or that is not necessarily able to take time off from work because it isn't paid or whatever the case may be. So, and I want to thank Danny Schlitt again publicly because from Parks and Rec, because he has come up with an idea to do what's called Rec Connect. And the registration for Rec Connect opens on August 13th. And if you go to the fallschurchva.gov website and search Rec Connect, you will be able to find it. But currently they are working on plans to accommodate students where there is an essential need. So this is not a program necessarily for a family where one person has an opportunity to take care of their kids. It really is an opportunity for families that have 2 working parents who have great need to be able to potentially access that program. So that's one, and we are continuing to look at other opportunities as well, because we know what the hardship is on our families. And then the last thing that of note that we're talking about are some metrics and measures, but I want to talk about those after the principals go, just to give you a broader scope of kind of where we are with the Virginia Department of Health, the Governor's Office, the Virginia Department of Education, and the like, because I do want to say this. There has been some lore out there that for some reason the City of Falls Church doesn't want our kids back. And I just want to say publicly, that couldn't be further from the truth. We want to have our kids back more than anything. No one wants to work in this situation or this circumstance. So I would like to sort of, as best I can, disabuse anyone from believing that we don't want our kids back. And we are committed to trying to find a way to do that. Over the course of the year, we do want to do it safely. We do want to do it transparently. And so by developing some of these measures and metrics in combination with the Virginia Department of Health, our local health authority, the State Department of Education, and also the Governor's Office will help us do that. So the last thing I'll say is I do think one of the things that I also want to share that I think will be helpful as you hear the principals tonight is we've tried as best we can to communicate as effectively as possible, whether it's through our Road to Recovery documents that we're putting out. Principals are sending out multiple emails to their families each week that sort of follow up the Road to Recovery. So there's multiple tiers of communication, but there still seems to be one piece that's a little bit lost in translation. And I think part of it was us trying to create information and documents that would provide for our community a sense of what school is going to look like when their kids come back. And as you may recall from our very beginning conversations, one of the things that we were really committed to doing was being able to flow in and out of different circumstances for different reasons. So if we were to move into a hybrid, that there would be a smooth transition from an all online program to a hybrid. And if we needed to move from the hybrid back into all online, there would be a smooth transition that way. So there are some elements of the online program that mirror the hybrid program and also mirror what a full return to school would look like. But I want to assure the community and families that we also recognize the social, emotional, and mental health needs of our kids. We have teams of experts on what is developmentally appropriate and developmentally responsive for the needs of kids. And there is not one document out there that would support putting kids in front of a computer for 6 hours a day. And it's just bad practice. And so I want to assure the board and I want to assure the community that as we think about what's happening all the way down to JTP and all the way up to the high school, each of those school programs are going to look different because they are going to be developmentally responsive and meet the needs of their kids in very different ways. A kid in high school, so when I think about Elizabeth, on our new board member here, her capacity to do online work is significantly different than a 4-year-old who's in our preschool program. So the amount of time that they're going to be on screens is going to be remarkably different. And they will be short intervals. And then the other thing that I want to let our community know too is that as we move through these lessons daily, we're going to do our best to record those as well so that parents can asynchronously work with their students at a different point in time. So for example, if I'm a parent of a preschool student and I'm working full time and I can't sit my child in front of a computer for a 20-minute morning meeting or something like that, we can always come back to it later in the day because it'll be recorded and it will be there. We certainly want to see our kids. And I think that's one of the values of doing any kind of work synchronously is one, we get to see our kids get to build community. But the way that we're developing this and building this is really two-pronged. And the first is to make sure that it has the most flexibility for our families, and it has the most flexibility so that we can ultimately move back into whatever the next phase is for us with respect to instruction. So I did want to put that out there just to let people kind of know what we've been thinking about. And at this point in time, I do want to turn it over to our principals because they're here and it's another night out for them, and I appreciate their time doing this. And I have asked them to talk for between 5 and 7 minutes to give you an overview and sense of what school is going to look like. So when a kid hits the door at Jessie Thackeray Preschool on the virtual door at Jessie Thackeray Preschool on August 24th, Marie, what are they going to see? So let me turn it over to you.
And Dr. Noonan, really quickly before we do that,
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to make sure, folks, if there's any burning questions right now with what Dr. Noonan has shared with us, that we could ask maybe 1 or 2 of those burning questions, and then after each of the principals has a chance to make their remarks, we could ask if there's a burning thing for them, and then we can ask questions at the end, just so folks can, if there's something that comes to mind right away. So I don't know if there's anything that anybody wants to ask right now about what Dr. Noonan shared with us in the introduction. Ms. Downs.
It's just a quick comment. Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, Dr. Noonan. And I appreciate the clarification on recording the live sessions, because I think that's what we've been hearing from our working parents of the Mount Daniel and Jessie Thackeray student groups, because those students do need a lot more hand-holding. So I think that should be really helpful for those families with 2 working parents to know that if they can't do it right then, the session will be recorded and they can come back to that. So thank you for that.
Certainly.
Thank you, Ms. Downs. Looking for other hands, and not seeing any right now. So why don't we go ahead and go forward to Director Rudy.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. So as you all know, JTP is not only that special program, but we have rather unique challenges during this time at this juncture, mostly because of the age of our kids. And yes, we do really want to be back, but we're going to do our very best to be flexible for families, for the children, and for the teachers in helping our families. So August 24th at about 8:15 in the morning, we will be starting our day with probably a 10 to 20 minute session for the kids. Each of the teachers will be doing a small introduction, a short introduction to each other, because that'll probably be one of the first times that they actually get to meet online. We will do our Meet the Teacher on the 20th through Schoology. So hopefully we'll be getting people used to that. And our plan is a combination of things. We're going to be doing the larger group beginning in the morning. And we're trying to do it at that time because that's when school would start anyway, once we hopefully get to come back. And it's also prior to when the other 2 elementary schools start. So we felt that that was a good time to get families going and just start with our younger kids. So we will be featuring relationship building and songs and read alouds and literacy at that point in time. And then we'll do throughout the day, mostly the morning, we'll do small groups for some early math, some movement, and some social learning. And then we will be providing activities to work on independently during the day with their families at home. And then finally, we'll do a larger group time prior to lunch for social emotional learning using our ALS PALS curriculum, which we started last year, and other routine building activities. I know that most people don't know what our ALS PALS is about, but it's great social emotional learning, but it's also done with puppets and songs. And so it's a good way for us to engage the kids and have fun too. So, but then our teachers and therapists will be working in the afternoon on an individual basis and some small group things with our families through 2 different methods. We'll be doing some coaching and parent coaching or coaching of au pairs or nannies. So some of the parents have told me that that would be helpful for them. And also doing some of the individual therapy sessions. So for speech, for OT, for PT, those will happen throughout the day. And in general terms, we're talking about a mix of live instruction, recorded lessons, independent practice time, and time for play and movement while the kids are at home. Schedules will be worked out for individual and small group sessions with our teachers, our paras, and our therapists to address all those needs, and especially our kids with special needs. And that's pretty much what it'll be like. We do know that some kids probably won't even engage, and that's why we feel that it's going to be important to be able to do that coaching piece with the families.
Thank you. That's fantastic information. And I just want to open it up for anybody to ask a quick question. And then I don't know, Dr. Noonan, if you've got anything follow up as well. So.
The only thing I would follow up on is I got to be part of an ALS PALS lesson last year, and it was an awful lot of fun. I would agree.
All right. Are there any questions right now? Maybe 1 or 2 burning ones. If not, we can keep on going.
All right. I'll turn it over to Mr. Kasich. Tim, thank you so much for being here tonight and talking to us a little bit about what's going on at Mount Daniel.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you all for having us. I'm excited to be able to share some of the information that's been put out in the last few weeks through Danny's Corner and some other communications. But tonight I'm really going to focus on some of the big picture items to hopefully clarify what school was going to look like the first day and then the first couple weeks. So first, like Marie stated, we do have our Meet the Teacher Day coming up on Thursday, August 20th. Families are going to receive notification of which class their students have been assigned to on or around August 14th. Around August 17th, teachers will be sending an email to all of their students' families that will include a link to a Schoology conference for the Meet the Teacher event. And we're going to stagger those times on Thursday, August 20th. So if you're a family that has maybe a kindergarten student and a 2nd grade student, you'll be able to attend both of those Schoology meetings. During the first couple weeks of school, teachers are going to be arranging individual meetings with students and families in the afternoons in order to get to know each child a little bit more on a personal basis. So we think that that'll be a great way to help build those relationships. As we all know, we'll be using Schoology as our primary learning platform, and teachers will be creating conferences to provide live instruction to our students. Schoology will also enable our teachers and staff to provide whole class, small group, and individual learning experiences for our students. And to reiterate what Dr. Noonan said earlier too, Schoology will enable our staff to record all of their lessons. And this is going to be due to help accommodate families who might not be able to engage during the live lessons. So all those lessons will be recorded so families can view them when it's convenient for them. This past weekend, parents who are new, including all of our incoming kindergarten parents, should have received an email with their Schoology login information. And our returning parents are going to use the same login information that they had from last year. I keep encouraging my families to view the Schoology videos that are on our website so that they can help their students manage as we get started on the school year. In thinking about our students' daily schedules, I just want to be very, very clear and reinforce what Dr. Noonan said earlier. There is absolutely no expectation that a student is sitting in front of a screen for 6 or more hours a day. I've been saying all along that that is not appropriate. What our teams are doing, they're working very hard right now, creating common schedules across a grade level so that each class in the same grade level will be doing approximately the same thing at the same time each day. We shared those schedules in last week's Danny's Corner, but we're going to remain flexible with it because what we start off with will be evaluated to see if it's working, and if we need to make changes, we'll communicate with the families to let them know how we're going to do better in engaging our students. The day is going to have short, focused lessons followed by time for independent work and reflection. And that independent work and reflection time frequently is going to be time that's away from the screens. Of course, we want all of our students to engage in the new instruction, which will be offered. There'll be math, language arts, PYP units of inquiry, and of course, our encore classes will be offered every day. And by those, I mean music, PE, Spanish, technology, enrichment, STEAM, and library. One of the things that we're really focused on though, too, is the social emotional learning of our students and the community building. So every day at 9 a.m., every classroom teacher is going to be starting their day with a morning meeting. And this is going to be a really great time for our students to build relationships with their peers and teachers, and hopefully have some fun learning how to be a kindergarten, first or second grade student. As to go back to what the first weeks of school are going to look like, we know that, we have some children coming in kindergarten who have never been in school before. This might be their first structured experience like this. And everyone has been impacted by COVID. We are excited that our first and second grade students who are returning do have some experience with Schoology and some online learning. So we're hoping for a nice, smooth transition to their next grade level. But it's with our kindergartners where I'm spending a lot of time thinking, because this is going to be an entirely new experience, and we're aware of that. And we're going to take our time for our students to learn how to be kindergartners at Mount Daniel. The teachers right now are planning together, the paraeducators are supporting, and they understand how new this is for our youngest learners. And they're working on age-appropriate experiences that will support all children. The teachers will be planning whole class activities during those first few weeks of school during the morning part of the session. And then, like I said, be having individual conferences with parents and students in the later part of the day in order to build stronger relationships and get to hear what parents have to share about their students and what their hopes and dreams are might be for their kindergartner, first or second grader. I just want to take a moment too to recognize that the Mount Daniel staff has been working very hard all summer to prepare for multiple scenarios. And when we finally landed on the online, we've been able to really focus our attention to those best practices in online learning and instruction. I'm proud to report that they're taking great care and planning for this very unique opening. And just to reiterate that we will also be closely monitoring how our students respond and make adjustments as needed. We're super excited and looking forward to getting to know our students and ready to begin on August 24th. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kasich. Are there any burning questions on this? Ms. Downs.
Thank you. I'm not sure if it's a burning question, but thank you, Mr. Kasich, very much. One of the things in the spring, our now third grader, but our second grader at the time, who was a Mount Daniel student, we often found it helpful to, his teacher would send sort of like worksheets, and we print those up. And that was great for him because he wasn't on a screen and he could sit there and work, practice his writing. Do you, and this could also go for Marie as well, those families who might have financial needs and not have printers at home and that sort of thing, is there an opportunity if we have workbook packets or that sort of thing that we can print those at the school and a parent can come pick those up?
Yeah, I can speak for us at Mount Daniel. We're already kind of working through some of those situations, and we were working closely with our social workers. If the families can't, for some reason, make it to the school to pick up those materials, we have social workers who are available to drop things off and to do it contact-free.
Terrific. Thank you.
And we are providing not just packet kinds of things, but also activities at JTP. And I have ordered some things so that children have manipulatives so that we can do not only some of the packet type activities that we did before, but real hands-on things. So we're sending things home too, for everybody.
And we'll be doing the same thing at Mount Daniel as well. We're passing out technology devices next week on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, as well as some packets and some manipulatives and some other things that the children will need at home.
Great. Thank you both.
All right, any other immediate questions? All right, seeing none, we keep on moving.
Yeah, I'm going to turn it over to the newly minted Dr. Swanson. Congratulations again, Paul, on your earned doctorate this week, to talk to us a little bit about what's going on at Thomas Jefferson.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Dr. Noonan and all. So when we thought about what a day in the life of a TJ kid would look like, let me sort of approach this from at first a high level and then get into some, I think, very specific day-to-day and even subject area things. I think the first thing that we wanted to do, and this has been mentioned, I think, on this call already, is that we wanted to make sure that we struck a really balanced chord with the instructional the model that we were presenting. So no student's going to be online for 6 hours a day, but no student's going to be online for 30 minutes a day either. We also wanted to make sure that we really hit the sweet spot for the level of rigor, that we were hitting state standards, but that we were also doing so in a way that allowed for us to backfill some of the things that kids maybe needed some reinforcement on with the closure of last spring. Our teachers have really worked hard looking at best practices for online instruction. And in the last several weeks, our team leaders especially have really gotten into some in-depth discussions about what that should look like, particularly surrounding the relationship of synchronous instruction versus asynchronous instruction. More on that in a little bit. And then we also wanted to make sure that the daily routine for kids would involve, obviously, academics, but also leave out or carve out some spaces for the interpersonal, I think, roles and obligations that we know that we need to fill with kids. And then finally, we wanted to make sure that we were really synced with Mount Daniel, making exceptions, obviously, for just age-appropriate differences. But we worked very closely with Mount Daniel, with Mr. Kasich and Mr. Farrar. So for instance, the community knows by now that we have synchronized our two schools' lunch periods so that all K-5 kids in the city of Falls Church will have the same lunch period. We thought that would be a great help to our families. So when we start to put all that together, what exactly does that look like when kids log into their Schoology conference at 9 o'clock? I think the first thing that will happen for every kid at TJ is that they will be engaged in a morning meeting. And that's a time for us to build community, for us to hear from our kids, for kids to even conceivably give voice to some of the struggles that they are enduring or celebrations that they have experienced. And throughout the day, there will be a mixture of synchronous and asynchronous instruction. So we're never going to have a kid, for instance, who would go through, let's say, a language arts block of 1 hour and 45 minutes, and that kid would be engaged staring at a screen for the entire time. There will be time for independent work. There will be rotations where kids will be working in small groups with the teacher, very similarly to what they would do in a face-to-face setting. And then there'll be some time for kids to either do independent work, like in a breakout room where they want quiet, but they still want a teacher to be nearby, or they can log off and just do independent work on their own. And that will also hold true for math classes. We anticipate the same kind of rotations for math as we would in the normal face-to-face year. And then obviously we'll be offering 45-minute encores. One of the things that we are really excited about, TJ, is that while we are still exploring our encore rotation, we recognize, as Dr. Noonan pointed out at the beginning of this presentation, that there are varying but very real needs for social and emotional learning. So one of the things that we are exploring is the ability of our staff to fold social and emotional learning into an actual encore block that our guidance counselors would fit in. And so we're still thinking that through and still looking at it, but it's a promising development, and we think that there can be some really good things that can come from that. And then finally, we've really worked hard and are continuing to work hard to really develop the same kind of consistency that I think Tim talked about, that we want to make sure that all of our third grade classes, for instance, really have an instructional program where all classes are in line with one another. And I think that also holds true for grades 3, 4, and 5, that there are going to be measured differences in one grade level to the next. It is true that a 5th grade kid is a different student than a 3rd grade student. But I think when you look from classroom to classroom within a given grade level, there's going to be a lot of commonalities. And then finally, we're also going to make sure that we have a fair number of breaks in the day. So for instance, kids are going to have a 1-hour break in the middle of the day, 30 minutes for lunch, and then 30 minutes of any type of recess that they would want. And then teachers will also be scattering in here and there some breaks for kids to take 15 minutes and go get a drink of water or whatnot. And so the last thing that I would say is that we feel like we are in a pretty good place at TJ. And one of the major reasons for that is that we have a staff that has been incredibly dedicated to this work. And I cannot say enough about them. We recognize that we think that we're in a good place, and we feel like we've got a pretty good model that still needs some finishing touches. But we're also very open to the possibility that, and even likelihood, that there will be some tweaks that we'll need to make along the way. All of us, every person on this screen, I think is going to learn some things about online instruction. And I like our chances to get it right, but it's going to be a process. And I think that's it for TJ. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Before you go to questions, can I just tag on to the comments
Absolutely.
that Paul and Tim said? One of the things that we heard pretty loudly and clearly in the survey at the end of last year, following our first foray into online, which obviously is different than what we're doing this time around. However, one thing that was clear was that there was a desire for common expectations across grade level teams. And so you're hearing, I hope, from Paul and from Tim, that there will be quite a bit of commonality among and between grade level team members, not only because that's best practice in instruction as those teams work to collaborate on common formative assessments and the like, but also there's a reality in all of this that we also need to sort of confront, and that is that there may be times in this quarter or however long we're in this position where one of our teachers gets sick, and we're going to have to be able to deal with that. And so being able to have perhaps a paraprofessional step into a teacher's room that is currently out because they're sick or a family member is sick, and be able to collaborate with a partner that's at the grade level and be able to know that that person stepping in and doing the same thing really creates some instructional redundancy for us across the buildings, which is really important. So I also wanted to just say thanks to Tim and Paul. They really have taken this idea of working closely together to an all new level. And I'm really proud of the work that they've done. And it's absolutely vital because they share staff and they share resources. And so they have to work so interdependently. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Noonan. And thank you, Dr. Swanson. Congratulations. That was a fantastic bit of news. And I would just like to open it up for anyone who has some burning questions for Dr. Swanson. Dr. Dimick.
Thank you for your presentation. This question is for Dr. Swanson and also Principal Kasich. I'm wondering what library will look like. I think one thing that we're losing is kids being able to go to the library and discover a new book that they don't have at home and don't have access to. And I'm wondering what we're doing to help them get excited about things. Reading is important, and it's nice to do some of that discovery on your own, and now that's not as possible.
Tim?
So in my conversations with Mr. Spindle, really kind of starting the year off, and we'll see how it evolves as the year goes on, but sharing, part of his passion for books, sharing some of his favorite books, and just really trying to generate that excitement for the love of reading and for literacy building. So it does look a lot different. I mean, being able to go into a library and just explore is one of the really great gifts that has been taken away from us. But I have full faith in Mr. Spindle and all of our specialists basically to do their best to recreate however they can those experiences for our kiddos. I know that he has a wealth of knowledge around books that children love to engage with, and that he's excited to get started. So he'll be doing live lessons as well as some asynchronous as well.
Dr. Dimick, thank you for that question. And Tim said it very well. It's a gift that's been taken away from us. Let me answer your question with maybe 1 part specificity and 3 parts planning and aspiration. So we know that at TJ, at least, library is going to be in the rotation. And I would anticipate that Brooke Davis, our librarian, is probably going to be doing the same kind of research skills, for instance, and library usage skills that she would typically do. So that we know for sure. Now, what we're exploring in a multitude of ways is, I think, the premise of your question. Is it possible for us, for instance, to have Brooke go into classrooms in the afternoon, get an idea of what, let's say, units of inquiry that kids are working on, what collective units are, but then also what are some individual interests, and then for her to go back into the physical space at the TJ Library, conceivably pull some books, and then try to make some arrangements to allow parents to come to TJ to pick up those books. That's kind of a big if, because there's a lot of moving parts to that. We are also exploring online books and digital books, and see if we can add some of those to the TJ collection. So I would say we're working on your question. Stay tuned. I hope that we'll have a little bit more vibrant answer for you.
Well, Dr. Swanson, I also wonder if there's a way to leverage the outdoor library that's in the front of the building. And then if there were days that perhaps we could set up out front, maybe a few carts, and have kids, outside come through with a parent and maybe pick out a book and kind of check them out. So there may be some other ways that we can kind of noodle through that too.
Absolutely.
And in our
In our support team meeting today, one of the things the support directors were talking about were what services they could offer to principals in support of activities like that. So as we're looking to repurpose staff, they were really thinking about not only what could we do operationally, but what potential things could we offer to principals to support their efforts, just like this library book distribution.
Can I
Thank
also
you, Ms.
jump in
Michael.
here and just
Yeah. Please go ahead, Ms. McCready.
we have also purchased a subscription to Mayan, which is an online resource for books that the students at Mount Daniel and TJ have access to, all different levels, fiction and nonfiction. And then just most recently, we are also working with something called Pioneer Valley, more for a guided reading, but they are leveled readers that teachers will have access to assign students and actually do running records to assess their reading levels. So there's just a variety of things out there that we're looking to embed within both schools.
Thank you. And Mr. Bates, I see you are off mute. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
No, thank you. Julie covered it. I was just going to share that I know Julie has been working with our reading specialists and some of our CTLs around leveled literacy, online leveled literacy resources that we want to get into the hands of our students and parents to support them, not just with reading selections that they may be interested in, but also targeted and focused reading to support gains.
Thank you. Are there any other burning questions at this point? Ms. Litton?
And I don't know if it's burning, so if we need to wait, but my question was along a similar vein, just on what we expect PE and music to look like, because, you know, obviously those are challenging to do online.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a great answer to that. It's an important question. I don't know that there's a great answer. We did, going back to the spring, we did have each of those Encore teachers create video lessons. Frankly, in the spring, they were probably on the back burner in terms of priority because we were really looking hard at just keeping up with core subject areas. This year, there will be sort of a more formalized approach. So I would anticipate, in fact, I know that our PE, our Encore team, has been working together to try to carve out lessons that will be engaging. I would anticipate there will probably be a lot more synchronous instruction with the Encore lessons than there are with, let's say, some of the others, simply because their block is shorter.
I'll tag on to that just to say that yesterday I received a document from Valerie Hardy that talked about how music at the middle school anyway is going to be delivered. And I intended to put that in your Friday update. So you get a chance to kind of see what it looks like at that level. And I think it's replicable at all different levels as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Litton was okay for now on that one, you think, or? I'm seeing, okay.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
thank you. Any other last question right now? Otherwise, we can continue on down. Ms. Downs has the last one, and then we'll go forward.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. It's actually a comment. I just wanted to compliment Dr. Swanson on his written communication. I now have two TJ. This is more from as a parent perspective, but I've heard several of my friends with TJ students very complimentary about the communications you sent out past 2 weeks and putting people's concerns and anxieties at ease. So great job on that. Must be the doctorate.
Well, the doctorate came with a lot of help from a lot of good people, including some people on the screen. And I'll definitely pass along your comments about the newsletters. That too was sort of group effort. So thank you.
All right.
So
go ahead.
So next is Henderson and Mason. And because that building is going to be one building in the not too distant future, Valerie and Matt are going to do their presentation together. I'm going to let Valerie kick us off, but I do want to also thank them for working so closely together, because they do share staff and they do share students. And so the fact that they they have to be 100% in sync. Because of that, it has been a really important component to the planning. And so, Valerie, I'll turn it over to you.
Dr. Noonan. Hi, everybody. And Elizabeth, yay, congratulations. It's good to see you here. I echo all the comments and accolades. It's just lovely to have you. So thanks for the opportunity to chat today. And I'm going to start off by saying Matt and I definitely have been, I would say 1, 2, 3, 4 times a day on the phone, as we really have been working nonstop to put all the pieces together to ensure that we are in sync for our students 6 through 12. It has also not been just Matt and I would not want to leave today without saying a shout out to our entire administrative teams, which for both Matt and I are newish leaders. And they have been shoulder to shoulder working collaboratively with us, alongside us, and really digging in to figure out how we do this so that it's right for students, right for our teachers, and really hitting what we feel are the right pieces regarding the feedback we received and the needs we know kids will have coming back to the building, or coming back to learning, I should say, after an extended summer. So just to kind of get us started, one of the things that Matt and I have really worked really tightly around was just getting the shell of our master schedules to be in sync. And as Dr. Noonan shared, with the goal of being able to pivot back into a hybrid mode, we really wanted to keep the academic structure to our A and B day as much as possible, allowing the master schedule that was built to still be what stands and how we group students for instruction. But then also wanted to honor the fact that, we've got a new element of social emotional learning. And I think developmentally for our students, that interconnectedness and engagement that they have missed, not being in the halls together, not being able to engage in athletics together, we felt it was vital that we find time in our day for that to occur. Similarly, in our schedule, you'll see that we were purposeful in adding a new block, which we'll talk about in a minute, called learning support, and having it be juxtapositioned right against lunch, so that there was a 2-hour chunk of time sort of in the middle of the day that was student directed. Because similarly to all of the levels that you've heard speak here today, no one wants students on a laptop from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock. It's not in their best interest. And so really making that purposeful time, but then offering an extended lunch time was something that we were pretty committed to at the onset. So what I think we all feel proud about is that our schedules allow for students to access the richness of the courses they need developmentally from 6 to 12, whether they are an emerging MYP learner with us in 6th grade or a DP candidate preparing to graduate this year. We wanted to make sure that all the richness of those needs were met. The other piece that you will see as you look at our schedules is that we really were focused on having that embedded social emotional learning into our school day, along with the opportunity for targeted enrichment and targeted intervention to meet the learning recovery needs that I know Ms. Macrina will talk about in a little bit. So what you'll see when you look, there are 2 blocks that I think we want to kind of define for you just in language today, and we have some nuances. So Mr. Hills will talk about what those nuances will sound like and feel like at the high school, and I'll speak to it at the middle school. The first block that we created is that learning support block. During that block, it runs from 11 to 11:55. And during our 55-minute instructional blocks, it will be very similar to what our colleagues shared here today, not a lecture, not a straight time when teachers are just going to be talking to you, but providing live instruction and also offering opportunity for collaborative conversation through breakout rooms in Schoology. But for that 11 to 11:55 block, all Henderson and all Mason teachers will be accessible for all students, and it will be student directed. And why that's kind of critical is I want to throw some numbers at you, because I think when we talked about it today, it was shocking for Mr. Hills as well. 142 of our students at Henderson will take courses that are offered by Mason teachers. But as Dr. Noonan shared, with our buildings being connected here in December, we use that as an opportunity to be creative with our staffing and really be able to bridge some of the instructional needs that we've kind of had to piecemeal together previously. So as a result, we have 71 Mason students who will be taking primarily language courses from teachers in our building. So what that meant was we had to have a block of time that was in sync to allow students to access teachers, to allow teachers to group students and the like. So that 11 to 11:55 block, that is what that time will look like. The second block that you see is on our schedule from 9 to 9:55. And that's the time that Principal Hills and I were committed to having enrichment, extension, extracurricular activities and opportunities for students to have that socialization and engagement, with an understanding that that time truly would be accountable, so that students didn't sort of feel like, oh, it's another block where I can kind of do what I want. No, it's another block where we're still going to ensure that as we deliver instruction to you through this new platform, we're meeting your needs and we can be reflective to them in real time as needed. In terms of the Meet the Teacher, I know we're both working on videos to kind of welcome students back to school. And we have some fun staff videos that we've put together. We will have specifically at the middle school, our incoming sixth graders will get a welcome to Mary Ellen Henderson virtual link that will go out this week. And we plan to do that on Friday so that they can watch that all live together. And we did have an opportunity for students to ask us questions. So it was fun to do a Q&A virtual style. And then in terms of Encore, we are offering a full complement of our Encore classes because they are core to MYP, they're core to our belief as a school division. And our programs have actually been working 6-12, so it's not just middle school, but really thinking about how does VPA and the visual and performing arts, how do they look like in this virtual space? And some things are different, but creating that community is really what they are rooted in, and the work that they are going to be putting out. And I know Dr. Noonan will share with you some of the thoughts that our 6-12 team had. So I will stop and allow Principal Hills to share how those nuances play out at the high school.
Thank you, Principal Hardy. Yes, I do want to reiterate how hard both the Henderson and Mason teams have been working on as we move into the Henderson Mason campus. I know, Dr. Noonan, that's a term we want to start using because it's going to be here before we know it, and we are all very excited. As we mentioned, we do share a plethora of faculty and staff members, and we also are sharing over 211 students, and that made this task even more challenging. But I think, as Principal Hardy so eloquently put it, we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our learners. And I'll start off by kind of talking and emphasizing about the developmentally appropriate nuances that we mentioned. When we think about the high school, and Elizabeth, you can attest to this as well, we've had several meetings over the last couple months talking about how our high school age students are yearning for those connection opportunities. So when we think about opportunities for them to engage in activities, clubs are a vital piece to what we believe in at Mason. Our new athletic director, Mr. Wooten, joined us last week. We were talking about all those different opportunities and how we can meet the needs of the students. And if you take a look at our schedule that we put out on Friday, we talked about our advisory, or what many of our students know to be our stable groups. We will be meeting in our stable groups, which is about 12 to 15 students in each of those groups, where they have a mentor or a facilitator or a teacher. One of those days will be dedicated to the social emotional learning piece. For example, our 9th grade students will be working on their Behind Happy Faces curriculum. That's a mental health curriculum we use. Our 11th and 12th grade students will be focusing on career and college guidance, which is something that we really need to be doing as we have our new career and college counselor, Miss Sherry Murrell, and she's been assisting. I'm sure you guys have seen many of her newsletters. Also, our 10th graders, we want to give an opportunity to make sure they have time to focus on their personal project. Also, during this time, we'll be talking about different opportunities that students have outside the world of academia, and that was extremely important to our students. So when am I going to be able to touch base with my robotics club or my international club members? How am I going to be able to connect with the students outside of those classes? And so we wanted to embed that time. And that block 4, as we added an additional block onto our schedule, is meant for that piece. So that was very important. And Elizabeth, thank you to you and your team for making sure that that was a point of emphasis for us as we developed the schedule. One of the things that we wanted to focus on, the 9 to 9:55 piece. So As Principal Hardy mentioned, at the middle school, they will be focusing on that SEL component on Mondays and Fridays. At the high school, we recognize that many of our courses, for example, let's say our IBHL English course, where there may be oral assessments associated. And so students are going to need additional structured time in order to make sure that they're able to collaborate with one another, to conference, and also to kind of extend some of their learning. For our 9th grade students who are all 220 of our 9th grade students are enrolled in the same world history course. And so there are projects and different required tasks that many of our students need to engage in. So this time will be used effectively, efficiently, and it's really in an effort to make sure that we support all of our students collaboratively. And so I just wanted to point that piece out. It's very important for our students to have that.
Great. And Ms. Pacrina, did you want to add something? I think at one point, Ms. Hardy said that you were going to talk a little bit about maybe the intervention piece.
I can tag on about learning recovery if that came up. That's what she had mentioned.
Maybe just a minute or two, if you wouldn't mind talking about the learning recovery plan, because I think that would be great to add to the context.
Sure. So this summer, actually prior to this summer, in the spring, teachers started identifying standards and what we called like power standards and things that essential that we wanted students to be able to learn, and identify some of those instructional gaps or loss of learning that may have occurred due to COVID. And so fast forward into the summer, we put together learning recovery teams at every grade level to focus specifically on math and literacy. And those teams worked to identify those missing standards that they wanted to make sure that we could embed into the current new school year. And with that, they readjusted and aligned pacing guides for the year. And what we're calling it is just in time teaching and folding it in. And so instead of front loading instruction, we are actually still teaching the current and the new content, but then folding in any of those standards that students may have missed. So those teams this summer worked on that, along with creating pre-assessments to all the units that will be coming up to help teachers pre-assess ahead of time to see the gains students made and some of the concerns that maybe we need to fill in, and that'll help adjust their teaching practices for the fall. So math and literacy was the focus this summer, but then as the rest of the content and teachers, the content teams come back together this next week, everyone will have an opportunity to really dive in deep into that same kind of framework. And this work continues all year long using a universal screener to help gauge those missing standards. And we will assess with our formative assessments and then do some definite data digs all throughout the year to adjust our learning.
Mr. Anderson, let's turn it over to you for questions.
All right, thank you. Thanks very much for all of that, and I would like to open up for questions from any member at this point. Dr. Dimick.
Thanks. Principal Hardy, I want to thank you so much for your Husky Herald communications. Those have been great and very useful to me to really get a sense of what school is going to look like. So thank you very much. And I guess I just have a question about, maybe this is more middle schoolers, but I think it applies to high school as well. It's so wonderful to see your friends, and my college students do this. You get in a breakout group and you let them go. They're discussing their thing. And then I, as a professor, pop into their breakout group and they're talking about things completely off topic. So if it's natural for college students, I'm sure it's more than natural for middle schoolers and high schoolers. Do we have any strategies for, in our online world, trying to help our students maintain some focus?
Thanks for that question, Dr. Dimick. Actually, when we were talking about this with our teacher leaders and teachers who have really been engaged all summer, offering feedback and guidance for us and how this process would play out in a virtual space, this was one of the things that they sort of talked about. Kind of happens in the building too, right? When we put them in small groups, or we have groups working in the hallway and the teacher has to pop out and sort of make sure they're still engaged. One of the things that we've created, we always have had school-wide expectations that align to our positive behavior system. And so we're really going to try to maintain that positive behavior reward system, since we can sort of award the points virtually due to the platform we have. But we've actually created some expectations around what it should look like when you are engaged in online learning, and then what that should look like in a breakout room, and how those expectations play out with teachers still being able to pop in. So for us, those first 2 weeks of school, where we're really going to be focusing on establishing relationships and sort of reuniting as a learning community, this is part of the work that we're going to be doing with our students, is helping them understand those navigational pieces of Schoology, but then more specifically, the expectations associated with how do we work virtually, and what is that going to have to look like. And for middle schoolers, we're going to have to practice a little bit. I think Elizabeth and the high school crew will probably roll into it a little smoother, but that is something that we actually have developed, and we'll go over with students in our beginning of year expectations.
Point.
Greg, I think you're muted. I think you were muted there. Elizabeth had her hand up though.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Elizabeth, I saw your hand, so go ahead.
I just wanted to add on to that, talking about the high school. In our student admin team meetings, we've barely been talking about how we want to create these norms of participation and engagement. So that's going to come from the school administration, but it's also going to come from students and the student council, and just really people saying, this is the time when I'm going to be involved. I'm going to get involved in class, and I'm also going to use the enrichment and the learning support time productively, because it's not just a study hall. And I think that's something that we've been really trying to emphasize, and that Mr. Hills has also emphasized during our meetings.
Thank you. I saw Ms. Litton had a hand up earlier, and then I see Mr. Bates has his hand up. Mr. Bates, is this an add-on, or is it okay if I go to Ms. Litton? I'm just asking.
It was an add-on. Board.
Then please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Anderson. So I was just going to say quickly to Dr. Dimick's question and the responses that have been provided previously, is that one thing we haven't talked much about are the accountability measures that need to be in place. And so with that, attendance is something that we have to look at as required by the VDOE, as well as the expectation for new learning, assessing students' learning, and grading assignments and assessments. And so one of the things, to Elizabeth's point, as we're helping students to become acclimated to this kind of new way of engaging in the learning process, those are some of the things that we have to really firmly establish from day one. But as we're supporting students, and we've talked a lot about the SEL, we talked a lot about opportunities for students to work independently or work with their teacher in a non-academic arena. We also have to look at some of those accountability measures that are in place, and that new learning and the assessment and the grading. And so our expectations would be that students are going to deeply engage and actively engage, and do the work with vigor and excitement.
Thank you. All right, I saw Ms. Litton, you had your hand up earlier. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I just had a question for Mr. Hills. Related to, I know in the past we offered classes at the Arlington Career Center, and we had a few classes that were maybe a little more career focused. I'm just curious, are we going to be able to offer some of those classes in this environment, and how difficult is that going to be to do online?
Thank you, Ms. Litton. That's a great question. The plan is, as of now, yes, to still offer many of those classes. As the board knows, we brought back many of those classes from ACC, including our EMT course, which we will be running this year. We will also be running our physical therapy course taught by Coach Gallagher. And we do have, I want to take a look at the numbers. close to about 50 students enrolled in Arlington Career Center courses. I've been working closely with Ms. Chung over at Arlington Career Center to make sure that our schedules are aligned so that our kids have that opportunity. So the plan is right now, students will actually be able to see their schedule, correct me if I'm wrong, Principal Hardy, on Friday, and those courses will in fact be in there.
Great, thank you.
Friday at 8 a.m.
There you go.
Schedules will go live.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Litton, I see your hand again.
Sorry, another question. And this is kind of for all of the principals and kind of a really high level question. But I'm just curious, kind of your sense, obviously for teachers. I mean, they did this in the spring, but this is a pretty big lift to be teaching in a whole new way. You know, and I think the expectations are even higher. I'm just sort of curious, do you feel like you're kind of where your teachers are? You know, are they going to get to the first day exhausted already, or how is it going?
I appreciate that question, Ms. Litton. I'll tell you, their engagement this summer has blown, I think, all of us away. You know, holding optional staff meetings in the summer and seeing 50 and 60 teachers actively engage. And when we put out the call for volunteers, they sign up. And when we say be creative, they are going there, right? But managing that with their own wellness and needing to take care of families and living through a pandemic, I think has been on the forefront of all of our minds and pacing that. So I do think, you know, we're appreciative for the 2-week kind of grace to slow in and really reestablish routines. But our teachers have really been taking the work that they've done, looking at our MYP units and looking at the best practices for online learning that's been produced by our CIA leadership team, and trying to see where are the things that are already kind of there and what do I need to morph to fit into this platform. So we've been trying to really message it that it's not a total rebuild of everything you know, but it's taking what you know and figuring out how to adapt it to this platform has really been our work. And using our support specialists to help with that, right? So that our time that when we have our shared department learning time, for example, at the secondary level, we're going to be able to unpack that together and work with your colleagues to say, okay, so this is what I was thinking for next week. What were you thinking? And maybe doing some development of lessons together that can be delivered live and chunked appropriately for students. But I think our message has been thank you, because we've needed their engagement to have their voice at the table. They have to live it, we don't. And also saying we're going to pace it. So don't try to do it all at once, because our teachers are awesome and they're achievers, and they want to do right by the students in this community.
And if I might add, Principal Hardy, to your collaboration piece. I mean, we talk often that, look, what you used to know, it's going to be a little bit different. So, you know, Dr. Noonan says it all the time. Think differently about instruction. And what I've seen out of my collaborative teams this year has been incredible. I mean, our departments meet on pretty much a weekly basis. They've been engaged in thinking differently and what that looks like and what that's going to look like. And I think there's something special about that team approach. We're all in this together. We recognize it's not going to be one person who's going to change everything, but together we can find a way to make it so that our kids have the most incredible experience. And so I think the teachers have a sense of feeling like they are supported. And when they have that sense of feeling supported, we're able to do tremendous things. And I just wanted to point that out as well.
And I would just jump in and reiterate everything that Mrs. Hardy and Mr. Hills have said, and just really emphasize that sense of collaboration is probably stronger now than it ever has been. When I have grade level teams and departments meeting throughout the summer to talk about what instruction could look like, and what we can do, and kind of get over that, well, we don't have these anymore, but here's what we can do, you know, really kind of taking this on in a very positive way. It just, my sense of pride in the staff, that not only at Mount Daniel, but when I talk to my colleagues throughout the entire division, our teachers have stepped up across the board. And yeah, this is not the summer to say, yep, I went and I refreshed and recharged my batteries. You know, no one's saying that, but they're excited to get back into the work. So that's kind of where we're living right now. And it was a great question. Thank you for bringing it up.
It does, Miss Litton. I think the fact that you would even ask a question like that, I think just says a lot about you, and it says a lot about this board that you're thinking about teachers. So thank you. I completely echo everything that my colleagues have said. I think my sense, based on the meetings that I've been in and the work that I see teachers doing, is that if there is a discomfort level, and there is, I think it's this fault line. I think that there is hardly a secret that we live in a community that has some really high expectations for our teachers. But I will tell you that our teachers also have very high expectations for themselves. And this is a learning process. And so I think if there is a level of discomfort, it is that discomfort of not knowing exactly where is that right balance between all these different dynamics. Where is the right balance between synchronous and asynchronous? Where is the right balance between direct instruction versus independent work? Where's the right balance between adequate screen time and too much screen time? So my sense is that that is a discomfort that is probably going to be with teachers on the first day of school and will probably last a little while until they really get their sea legs.
Mr. Bates.
Thank you, Board Chair Anderson. I figured I would just go ahead and pile on while everyone's at it. I would say this, and I've shared this with the principals and our CIA team. We have to be able to trust that our teachers are in the best position to make instructional decisions. And that speaks to a little bit of what Paul just shared. Our teachers are consummate professionals and they want to do well. Our teachers care about our students and they want to see our students achieve, and they want to see our students be successful. They want to see our students thrive and do well. And so we're fully confident that when we bring our teachers together and we put these challenges in front of them, they're going to sit around the table, albeit virtually, but figure out what those barriers and challenges are that need to be removed so we can help our students be successful, whether it's where we currently sit, whether it's a few months out and we're in a hybrid model, or whether it's full face-to-face. It's evident when you walk into teachers' classrooms. It's evident when you pop in on a Schoology session where teachers are interacting with students. It's evident when our professional school counselors are having individual meetings and providing guidance to our students. They want our students to succeed, thrive, and achieve, and we're not going to allow this current situation to get in the way of that. So I just wanted to share that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments at this point? Dr. Noonan, I think we still have the CIA team and other things, correct?
Well, we have two more people that who I know can be concise, and so I appreciate that. The first is Jen Santiago to talk about some of the updates in ESOL that we have from the last time we were together, and then the Empress of COVID and all things special ed. And we probably should give her an honorary doctorate just in medicine because she's done so much with some of the data that's out there. We'll call her Doc Sharp. Anyway, and Rebecca Sharp this evening too. So with that, we'll go with Jen Santiago for a quick update, and then we'll go to Rebecca Sharp for a quick update.
Thank you. So we have just a couple things to update on in the world of ESOL since the last time I was with you all. So I guess adding information on to what's happening at the secondary level, we had briefly talked about how the ELD classes at the secondary level are going to be aligned to the MYP-IB language acquisition guides. And Miss Paige Haney, who is just a real stellar teacher that we are so blessed to have in Falls Church City, is she worked all summer creating the curriculum for the level 1 classes and for the level 3-4 classes for the middle school and the high school. And through that curriculum project, she got all the curriculum writing completed for all of that. So that's just a huge load that she carried, and she did a beautiful job with that. So we're really excited to be able to roll out an ELD curriculum that is not just ELD, but it's MYPIB. And I don't think there's too many other school divisions that can say they're doing that. So it's something that we're really excited about. So, did we plan to have it start in a virtual world? We did not, but Paige did a great job knowing that we were possibly starting in a virtual world and getting those units set up to be usable in a virtual world. So that's really exciting. She's been providing the training for the teachers that are teaching that class as well. So I'm really excited about a really solid ESOL program that's happening at the secondary level, in addition to things that we talked about the elementary level last time. So in addition to ELD class, the students are, we talked about, I sat down with the new director of counseling sat down with Sarah Snyder, who's the new director of counseling at the high school, and the counseling team there. And we hand scheduled all the ESOL students to make sure that they had appropriate courses with their ELD class, as well as what kind of co-taught classes they would need and sheltered classes they would need to based on their levels. At the last time I spoke with you, we didn't have very clear guidance from the state. We had kind of very gray guidance with the state about how to identify English learners at this time. So typically when we identify an English learner for any student who registers to a public school, they answer the 3 home language survey questions. And if an answer other than English is presented, then it automatically triggers that we have to screen the student for ESOL services. So most of the students that we screen do not qualify for ESOL services, but it's a lot of screening. So that screening can only be done face-to-face. So we've really been trying to figure out how we could do that safely. Loudoun County has opened up some screening, so I have a meeting with their director tomorrow to talk about that. But the state has come out, and what their gray direction was, we could reach out to the family and the student, have a conversation with them, and use our professional judgment as ESOL teachers. If that student would likely identify as an English learner, then we could put them into ESOL classes, but not formally identify them in the PowerSchool system. The state this week has come out and been a lot more clear and supportive in their guidance and saying, that's exactly what you should do. Reach out to the families, find out if they would be presumptive eligible for services. And here's a temporary code that we can put into PowerSchool to identify them as, we believe the student to be an English learner. And as soon as we're possible, we will screen them face-to-face. So that's kind of the ESOL side of it. The equity side of it that I just wanted to tag on to the question earlier about giving access to some new readers and some book access across the board is this really exciting conversation that Miss Macrina and Miss Prather and I had with the lead of the middle school social justice team club, which, man, what a delightful young lady. And just such a great group that are leading really, really great things. And so one thing that we talked about with them, and they're so focused on ensuring that the work that they do is student-led and student-driven, and we're just there to support them and be facilitators of that work. So what they're going to do is identify some social justice oriented books that have themes that are age appropriate for JTP, Mount Daniel, and TJ. They're going to record themselves doing a read aloud of that book and provide some conversation about why they chose that book, what the theme was in that book, and some thought questions for the children to think about. But then also provide some guiding questions for teachers so that if they use this in their class or they post this on their Schoology as another activity, they would be able to have deeper conversation about some social justice themes that are really age appropriate JTP through TJ. So we're pretty excited about that. And so that's most of my update. Thank you.
Thank you. That last part is that just is kind of inspirational. That we have our student leaders doing this. It's just kind of impressive. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for this community, because man, it's just a joy.
All right, are there any quick questions? Otherwise, I think it's time for the Empress of COVID.
All right. Be sharp. Take us away.
All right. Good evening. In addition to my COVID powers, I now do believe that I am a quasi-epidemiologist. So we'll see how that turns out. All right. Tonight, I want to give you all an update since the last time I was with you on the work that our schools and our amazing school teams have been doing for our students with 504 plans, as well as our special ed students. I'm going to start with our 504 plans. We have this year, we're starting out the year with close to 200 504 plans across the division. And our school teams have been reviewing all of the 504s for their accommodations to ensure that there's clarity regarding the implementation of those accommodations in the virtual setting. So our case managers, who are our school counselors, I want to give them a big shout out for this heavy lift that they're doing. And they've been reaching out to all of our parents and looking over those documents, to reviewing them and updating them as needed. Some of our 504 plans don't need to be to be updated because it's really, the accommodations that are on there really, can be implemented in the virtual platform. It's when we see that there might be an accommodation that can't be implemented in the virtual platform or might need to be adjusted in the virtual platform that we're having to revise, and that they're also working really hard to make sure that our students are going to be provided with their accommodations and strategies and having those in place across all of their coursework. So I want to give a big thanks to them. Another big piece of what we've been working on in special ed since the last time I was with you is having, I've held meetings with all the school teams, and I want to give a big shout out to Seamus and our special education administrators, especially to Marie, who functions in that role, and to Allison, who takes care of TJ and Mount Daniel. And a big shout out to Brittany Allen Shaw, who is new to our special ed ranks. And you talk about baptism by fire. She, who wants to become a special ed administrator in the middle of COVID, but she's doing it and doing an amazing job. And a big shout out to Sia Knight as well. And so I want to give, a special thanks to them. They have been working seriously overtime. Anytime that I say, can we come back together? They're like, all of them are there. And what they have been working on is really meeting with their school teams and making sure that we are reviewing and we're revising all of our IEPs. We're starting out this year with over 340 IEPs. So that's a heavy lift that we have to do, and they've really are doing amazing work with that. So all of our IEPs are being reviewed and revised so that we can address the service delivery for what it's going to look like across 3 models, because that's been a little bit difficult for us in special ed land, really making sure that IEP is clear for here's what your child services look like in face-to-face instruction. Here's what your services would look like if we were in a hybrid model. And here's what your services look like in a virtual model, because it's not a straight transition. There are so many, intricacies that go into this. And so one of the pieces that we have developed is a document that's going to be amended and addended to every IEP across the division. I want to give Tricia thank you for making sure that our document is legally compliant. And what it's going to really help with is to help parents be able to see across all 3 models, here's what my child's special education and related services are going to look like. So we're really excited about that piece, so that gives clarity to everybody that's involved with that student about what this is going to look like. Another big piece that we've been working on is developing personalized schedules for our students with disabilities. In fact, Allison Klink and I met last night. We were on a Google Doc together last night at 10 o'clock, and I was fussing at her because she shouldn't be on there at 10 o'clock. But, we were working through what does, this student's schedule look like, and laying it out very specifically. And I also want to give a big shout out to our principals and our APs and our schools who develop these common schedules. This has really made it easier for us this time around because of the consistency to figure out where are we going to be able to provide the students related services, for example, where, how are we going to fit in OT and PT? And so those common blocks that have been given really have lended itself to us to, really be able to provide more continuity for students. The other piece is that schools really are busy assigning case managers and making sure that we have one person who is going to be the contact for that family. That is a lesson that we learned from the springtime that was really important, and that we heard very clearly from our families, in part of their feedback, is making sure there's one person who's providing that continuity and really is that conduit for communication. So, parents aren't getting emails from, 4 or 5 different people about their services. To help with that, that's why we're creating those personalized schedules. For example, at Henderson and some of the cases at GM, they're using Google Calendar for a student. So that student will have a Google Calendar. And so everybody who works with that student can go in and make sure everything's scheduled. And then the parent can also see what's scheduled. The student can also see what's scheduled. So we're trying to replicate some of those things. I also want to let you guys know that our paras have been working so amazingly hard, and I'm grateful to them. They really stepped up in the spring to be there for our students. They miss our students. Our paras are so critical to the services that we provide, and they missed their kids. And so they were there. They were on Google Phone with them. They were in Schoology with them. And so we're really working hard to make sure that they have all the technology that they need so they can be an integral part of our service delivery as we launch virtual special ed world for 2021. The other piece that we really spent a lot of time working on are our related services. I'm going to brag about Falls Church special ed, for just a minute here. When the spring occurred, a lot of school divisions weren't able to provide the level of services that we did. All of our students received their related services in the spring. There were a lot of places who weren't able to provide OT and PT and speech and those services, but our folks stepped up. And so they're continuing that work. And then we're looking at how can we, leverage the resources that are in Schoology to help make it easier. And then another piece that I'm really proud of our related services folks, because this is a big shout out to Vicki and Barbara and Hafsa, our OT and PT folks. They're coming together and they're creating bags of materials that we're going to be able to send home to our students who particularly have OT and PT needs. So we're going to put things in there like Theraputty and some of the Wiki Sticks and some different fine motor activities. And then Vicki is coming up with some, if we've got kids who need a jump rope, we're going to be able to put that in the bag for the student to address those multimodalities. And I think that question that was asked earlier about the packets and offering the alternative materials, that's another piece that we've been working on, that some of our students really they have to have the hands-on materials. And so for those students, they're going to get bags that address their multimodality needs, that and address some of those multisensory needs. So it may be that we're sending home not just packets, but those some of our kids really need the actual textbook. And so if that's what they need, we're sending that home. And so we were able to do that in the spring through contactless pickup, and we're going to continue that. Another piece that we've got in place that we're going to continue to keep in place for our special education students is we're continuing with IXL. That is one of the pieces that we put in place. We enrolled all of our students with IEPs in IXL, which is an adapted online learning program that really allows students to be self-directed, as well as our IEP case managers, our special ed teachers can go in and assign specific activities for kids to work on related to their IEP goals. And, and it was optional. And we have had such a great response to that by the majority of our parents and majority of our kids. And we're seeing great progress in there. So we're going to keep that piece in place. for our students. And we are increasing our small group time and our one-on-one conferences. Another piece that we are now adding to IEPs is parent coaching. Parents are extremely critical partners in the work that we're doing, given the environment that we're in. And we're following the guidance of VDOE and OSEP regarding the IEPs. That is one of the clear guidance pieces that was shared, that parent coaching is a service that can be provided via the IEP to help a student be successful, particularly if you think about, our students, at JTP with Marie. Those are the kids who really do benefit the most from that parent coaching service being placed on their IEP. So we're looking at those pieces. And our goal is can we replicate what's on the IEP already in the virtual setting? And when we can't, then we make adjustments. And we recognize that, some of our students, struggle in the online setting, but what we're really moving to get the IEP teams to talk about is, why is that student struggling? So what are the pieces that we need to put in place? So if that student is struggling because of attention or being confined, because if you think about all of us here tonight, we've been sitting right up on our screens for going on 3 hours and 1 minute, according to my clock. And so that's really difficult because of how our cameras are. So we're looking at how can we leverage different types of cameras so that a student can stand back and the teacher can still have a really good view of the student. It might be a view of the whole room, so that, if the student needs to pace back and forth, that's okay to do. And they can still be engaged and the teacher can see them, the student can still interact. So we're looking at those things. So where we can replicate, we do, and where we can't, we are adjusting. And we're hoping that, as we move back into face-to-face instruction, another piece that we will have in place that is is part of the VDOE guidance and the OSEP guidance for implementation of IEPs is that when we return IEP to face-to-face, I don't know if we'll ever get back to normal, maybe what our new normal is, that the IEP team will come back together and they will address how COVID recovery services might need to be provided to that student based on the impact of the closure on them. So I know I was supposed to be brief, but we've been doing a lot of work in special ed because it's a unique challenge for us given the situation that we're in.
Well, thank you very much for that. I do see a hand up. Ms. Downs, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you, Ms. Sharp and Dr. Noonan. I have a question for both of you. Ms. Sharp, I recently, a couple days ago, heard from a community member who had questions about her son's 504. I directed her to the principal. I wasn't sure. Will parents, if they haven't heard from the specialists they've been working with either 504 or IEPs, will they be hearing from someone before the start of school? If they have questions, where should we direct them?
You should direct them to their counselor, because our school counselors function as the 504 case managers across all of our schools. And if they go on in our Road to Recovery that we put out on July 24th, there's that chart that has the 504 details and then the information for the contacts. That's a great question.
And then for students with IEPs, will they also, I know that your staff and all the specialists have been doing, I can't even imagine the amount of work that you all are going through, but will parents whose students have IEPs, will they be hearing from their specialists before?
Yes. Exactly. That's another great question. They will be hearing from their case managers, and in some cases, it's the special ed administrator that reaches out to parents and helps get those meetings set up in place.
Thank you very much. Again, you and your staff have done a phenomenal job, so I really appreciate all that you all do. Dr. Noonan, this is a question for you. I know that you updated the board with one of your Noonan's notes about some of the work you've been doing behind the scenes and what the statement that the school board issued in support of going online. We specifically talked about, the need to bring back our most vulnerable learners sooner rather than later. And I know that you've been working behind the scenes with trying to figure out testing, and there's also an issue of public health nurse availability. So I just wanted to ask, have you, your colleagues, superintendents and other, neighboring school systems, have you all kind of banded together to talk with the state I know you have, but I just wanted to get sort of an update for people listening tonight on that.
Yeah, so thanks. There's maybe a couple of questions in your question. And the first is that we remain committed to, the first answer is we remain committed to trying to bring back our most vulnerable students as quickly as we possibly can, so long as it's safe and conditions will allow for that. I think the question that's being raised pretty strongly is, so what are the conditions that you would bring students back? So what are the measures and metrics that you're going to look at to determine whether or not students can come back? And so I was going to spend some time talking about that. This might be the perfect sort of segue to do that, Chair Anderson, if that's okay. And
I think that's fine, because it's definitely a question that we're hearing a lot.
Yeah. So when I think about the measures and the metrics for returning to school, in my mind, there are really two different categories of them. The first is the scientific measures, and the second is the operational measures or operational needs that must be in place for us to be able to come back. So let me start with the scientific measures and the scientific metrics. We have been, I'll just share, it's been a challenge for the superintendent, not only with the VDOE or the Virginia Department of Health, but also with our own health department, trying to get what we would consider some sort of dashboard look that would give us a sense for where are we in the context of transmission in terms of rolling averages. Do we have enough contact tracers? Do we have enough capacity in our hospitals? Do first responders, what is the rate of transmission among first responders and doctors? And that's really important, because if the doctors and first responders are getting sick, we don't have anybody there to take care of people that get sick. So there are multitudes of factors that go into this. So long story short is that the Virginia Department of Health has now begun to develop a multi-metric composite that when these 8 factors are, then they're all weighted. So 8 factors that are weighted go into this composite. It spits out either you have no risk, you have low risk, you have moderate risk, or you have a substantial risk. I can't tell you at this point what the thresholds are. I can't tell you what all of the levels within each of the measures are, but I can tell you what I believe are the 8 things that they are looking at, including in the composite. And so I think that that may be helpful. The first is that they're looking at the case incidence. So in other words, what is the count of the new COVID-19 cases per 100,000 population? And we can already go on, for example, the Fairfax County Health Department website or the state website, and you can drill down to multiple jurisdictions and look at those to find out what the daily rate is in terms of new case incidence. The second factor or metric that they're looking at putting into this composite is the PCR test positivity, percent positivity. So in other words, among the tests that we're getting back, what is the percentage of positives? And one of the things that is a reasonable measure of is there enough testing in the community to determine whether or not we have the capacity to test everyone that needs to be tested. The third is the rate of COVID-19 outbreaks. And so what they're looking at in that measure is the count of outbreaks per 100,000 in the population. The fourth is, and again, I sort of alluded to this earlier, the percent of COVID-19 cases among healthcare workers. So specifically, they're looking at the threshold of healthcare workers that are particularly first responders, doctors, and nurses. The fifth is the rate of emergency department visits for coronavirus-like illnesses. So they are looking at ED or emergency department visits by the 100,000 population and are developing sort of what the threshold would be for that. They're also looking at rates of confirmed COVID-19 intensive care unit hospitalizations by 100,000 population. They're looking at the percentage of hospital beds that are currently identified as vacant or occupied. And then lastly, the numbers of hospitals that are reporting trouble acquiring PPE. So those 8 factors are those factors that will go into the composite, we believe, that the Virginia Department of Health is putting together. Then what they'll do is they'll look at it by region, as I understand it, and they will give us a regional rating of none, low, moderate, or substantial. That tool is not available to us currently. It's still being refined. It's still being reviewed. It's still being tweaked by local health departments and the like. But the superintendents have banded together, to sort of use your word, to ask for the opportunity to see that tool. And what we have been told is that from all the way up at the governor's level, there's no interest in giving school divisions this, this tool that has these measures and metrics in it that then spits out a rating. Rather, what they would like for us to do is to continue to work through our local health departments. And then the local health department will tell us what our rating is based on all of these individual measures that we don't actually know the answer to. And then we have to respond to whatever that rating is. So we're pushing on that pretty hard locally to try to get more information. But in the meantime, there are a few measures that we are looking at locally that we're pulling from a variety of different websites just to look at what the transmission levels are across our region. So we're looking at, for example, the 7-day positivity rate. We're looking at, and which is a positivity rate over a 7-day period, the number of new cases daily per 100,000, which then would give us a rolling 7-day average. We're looking at the infection rate among the total population, and we're also looking at the percentage of contact tracers that are able to act upon a case within 24 hours. Now, this is our homegrown internal metrics that we're looking at right now and trying to build out in absence of having something else. And the part of it that I think is important to note here is that the 2 health districts that we feel like we need to pay the closest attention to within these metrics are the Fairfax Health District, which we are part of, and also the Arlington Health District, because that's where the vast majority of our families live, or our teachers and staff live, is either in Fairfax or in Arlington. So as we continue to refine these mathematical measures, then we also need to look at the operational measures. And some of the operational measures that we are beginning to contemplate is teacher and staff availability. And I'll give you a perfect example of how that plays in. It's very, very difficult to find an IB/HL physics teacher. It's very hard to find an IB/HL Spanish teacher. It's very hard to find a number of different teachers, special ed, for example. And if our IB/HL Spanish or IB/HL physics teacher takes a year-long leave of absence and we can't fill behind that person, then we're in a world of trouble, because we can't then offer that course to our students because we have no capacity. So some of the things that we have to really pay attention to as we're considering any reopening is, do we have the staff and teacher availability to us? As you mentioned, another operational component to us that we have to pay attention to is access to public health nurses. We have a significant number of our special education students that also have health plans that go along with their programs. And we need to have those public health nurses back on site. We've been told now that it'll take at least 30 days of planning to release them from their current work with the Fairfax County Health Department. But if we come with a plan, that they would work with us. Best practice indicates that we have a 90-day supply of PPE. We are currently working on inventorying that PPE to determine whether or not we have, one, the right PPE for our staff and faculty, and two, do we have a 90-day supply of that? We also need to make sure that we have the capacity to implement the best practices for viral containment. So do we have people that can do temperature checks, mask checks, sanitizing checks, division-wide for us as well? So there are a number of factors that also from an operational perspective come in. So it's not just a matter of have we met these threshold numbers, it's also can we actually do it? So I think that the really wonderful thing about being able to take a little time is to give us a chance to get our feet on the ground. Give us a chance to have our teachers are going to be coming in, many of them into our classrooms and working from their teaching studios in their rooms. If we're able to get folks' feet on the ground, to get a sense of what it feels like to be back in the community, to be back in the school, at that point we can, after the first few weeks of school, we can then begin to broach, okay, what would it look like to bring some students back? But I do think right now we have to settle into this a little bit and find a way for us to get settled, but then also give the Virginia Department of Health an opportunity to finish up whatever they need to finish up so that we have good measures and metrics to help determine whether or not we bring kids back. So it's a long answer to your short question, but it is more complicated than just our per 100,000 cases in the city of Falls Church is 406. So that's nothing. We should be able to open, or our, not 406. That's the total number of cases in city of Falls Church. Well, it's not just Falls Church we have to look at. We have to look at Fairfax. We have to look at Arlington, and I think that those are reasonable to look at. And then we need to determine whether or not we have the staff to really open. That, Chair Anderson, actually, with that, going through those measures a little bit, ends all of our presentation for the return update, which was more like a 2-hour presentation. So sorry about that.
Well, thank you. Dr. Noonan, that last answer is a question we are all hearing a lot, and having a very clear set of ideas as to what those measures are, both in the scientific domain and the operational domain, was really critical. So, Ms. Downs, thank you for the triggering question also, but thank you for that very, very good answer. So I'd like to ask if there are other questions anyone has for anybody on this particular item at this point.
We do plan to put some information in this week's Road to Reopening about some of the metrics and measures that the VDH is working on to help educate the community as well. Again, we may not be able to give the full information about thresholds and the like, but just so that people can understand what it is that's going into that composite.
Yeah, understanding how complex the picture really is important, because it isn't just as simple as look at that one graph and see which way that line is going and make a decision. I know, but so. Any final questions from anyone on this? Not seeing any, I'm going to take a minute and just say, on behalf of the board, thank you to everyone on this call, all of the staff and the teachers and everyone who has been working so incredibly hard over the last several weeks under amazingly stressful conditions for their own personal lives, in addition to their professional lives, to put together some really good plans for coming back to school in 2 weeks. We're very grateful for all of the work that you've done, and being able to do it with flexibility to understand changing conditions, respond to new information as it's coming in, and keep those other plans so that as we move forward, we're able to go back there to things that have already been done. Thank you all very much for all of the work that you have done. And it's one of those things where I stop talking because there really aren't words that are adequate. So, but thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to share. And I too would echo your comments. We've had incredible support from our teachers, incredible support from our administrative teams, incredible support from the operations team and the instructional team. And because of their work, it looks like this is gonna be okay. Is it perfect? No. Is it what we wanted? No. But we do think it's going to be, considering the circumstances, pretty good. So appreciate that. Chair Anderson, if I may, is it okay if we let the principals and the CIA team go? They've got big days tomorrow.
Yes, I was definitely going to suggest that we actually should take a 5-minute break at this point as well. And so we'll reconvene at 10:25. And thank you all very much. And we're looking forward to the next couple of weeks. All right, why don't we go ahead and come back together now and restart. I'm going to go ahead and move forward now to item 7.03 on the agenda, update on school renaming process, and this will be a fairly brief item. Just want to make sure to bring folks up to date. At our meeting back in July, there was agreement that we were going to go forward with trying to identify a consultant who might be able to work with us to gather public input as part of informing the board's decision of whether or not to consider a new name for George Mason High School or Thomas Jefferson Elementary School. Since then, I just want to make sure that folks know I've been pursuing that avenue, as well as looking at some other options to have options available for us going forward. And at this point, no decision. We're at this stage. We still have some options that we're looking at about one essentially being to go forward with the concept that we've been talking about of a consultant, another one to be a consultant perhaps with a somewhat different focus in giving information to us, and then a different way of gathering more public info. So just so that everybody knows, that process is ongoing. We're not at a stage where there's anything really firm that I can ask the board about. But I want to reconfirm with everybody the idea that we are still looking for a process by which we have some structured input coming in from the public in a survey or similar document, and then another process to gather input in some sort of a public forum, and just get a sense to make sure that that is still the direction. I believe so, but I just want to reconfirm. And so seeing if there are any questions or any shaking of head to suggest that that's not a course that the board still wills me to pursue. And not seeing any shakes, I will take to indicate that is still the will of the board, and so I will continue on and come back to you when I have further updates. So that takes us then to item 7.04, which is a policy item. And Dr. Noonan, I presume this is an item for Ms. Minson, but I just want to frame that this is a different item that we are talking about, the possibility of waiving first reading on a policy change and going straight to second reading and adoption. And I believe Ms. Minson can give us context and more info.
Okay, go ahead, Tricia. Yeah, I was gonna do it, but I'll leave it for you.
All right, sounds good. Good evening. Yes, as Dr. Anderson shared, the policy that's up for first reading, or perhaps waiving or first reading and second reading adoption tonight, is policy GBA-JFHA. This is the prohibition against harassment and retaliation, and this also encompasses the division's Title IX policy. We have been waiting. I say this, the Council of School Attorneys across the country have been waiting with bated breath for a year and a half or so for the regulations from the U.S. Department of Education, and those did come out from DOE's Office of Civil Rights earlier this summer, with the requirement that schools put their policies on Title IX include in the regulations certain procedures by August 14th, and then have training for staff by then. We did get the suggested revisions from the VSBA, who does provide us with our policy services, towards the middle and end of July. So this is the first meeting that we've had that we could bring these policies to the board for their review. So while usually when we have this type of changes to our policies, we would have a first reading followed by a second reading and adoption, it is my strong suggestion this evening that the board waive first reading and move straight to second reading and adoption, both because of that requirement from the Office of Civil Rights that the policies be in place at the beginning by on or before August 14th, and also so that the policy can be in place prior to the first day of school. So if there are any issues or concerns that are raised, we would be using this one policy. Of course, the board always has the opportunity to come back and tweak the policy again. So if the board were to waive first reading and go to second reading and adoption of this policy this evening, and then come back in September and say, there's some language we want to look at, or we have some more questions about this, there's nothing that would prohibit the board from doing that from down the line. So with that background, I'd be happy to walk through some of the major changes in this policy from what it was previously. You'll notice on the first page, oh, and I did include in red font all the proposed changes from the VSBA based on the new federal regulations, and then some smaller tweaks that I would suggest that are in green. I also would be remiss if I did not thank our Queen of COVID, Becca Sharp, who's also our Title IX coordinator. She has been amazing in the past in putting together all of the templates that we provide for our principals and directors on how to do investigations. And she and I have spent a lot of time going through this policy, making sure that we're going to be ready to hit the ground running to train staff. And as a practical matter, and Becca, please do jump in if you think I misstate or overstate, or there's anything that's not included or I'm not clear on. But as a practical matter, even though there are a number of changes and there are a number of pages in here that completely change the Title IX or look like they change what our Title IX policy is, we don't think this is going to change very much as far as our investigations, how we support our staff, how we support our students. So some of the major strike throughs are just calling things different titles or not having things broken out in the same way. One of the changes on page 1, for example, was changing who the protected statuses are. That's something that the board already conquered in its July policy readings. The board had already included sexual orientation and gender identity, which were now added by the VSBA. So you'll notice those aren't in red because this board had chosen to do that back when this policy was adopted in October of 2019, but added pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions there. Also broke out the definitions of a compliance officer and consent, which is required under the regs. You'll notice that on page 2. Page 3 also then specifically defines sexual harassment prohibited by Title IX, and then narrowly defines that so that it's very clear anyone doing an investigation under this or any parent or student who had concerns would know how sexual harassment prohibited by Title IX is defined. That would be the main changes. Other things that we're going to change in our practice going forward would be there are some additional timeframes that are added. So you'll see that there's a initial report that's compiled, and that report is shared by both the individuals are no longer called the complainant. Now it's the individual who's been presumed to be accused to be harassed, and the person allegedly harassed. And the person alleged to do the harassing. So that's changed in here, but there's a 10-day time period where those individuals can provide additional information to make sure that the final decision maker has received everything. So it will be extending the timelines a little bit, but again, I don't think that it's really going to change our practices very much. I did send this out to the board late last week, and I haven't received any questions on this and would welcome questions or comments from the board to this policy GBA JFHA.
Thank you, Ms. Minson. Are there comments or questions from the board? There were a couple of things I saw that I guess I would like some clarification on, but I'd like to ask others first.
Sure.
Okay. One part, Ms. Minson, that I wanted to get clarification on is, are there changes in, I recall there being changes in sort of the process, in the sense that when an allegation is made of harassment, that the process now requires there to be the ability to, forgive me, I don't even know what the right word is, but to ask questions directly of the person who has filed the complaint. Is that part of this, or is that strictly at the collegiate level, or what? That was a change in the regulations.
That's at the collegiate level. At the collegiate level, there does have to be an actual hearing. Here, there can be questions that are submitted. So an individual who is accused of harassing an individual, and I should have that language at the top of my head, the person alleged to have been one second. The alleged harasser, I guess is what it's called on page 7. That individual can submit questions that then the investigator can ask or can choose not to ask. So that still is within the discretion of the compliance officer and the investigator, but there's not a direct questioning of witnesses at the K-12 level.
Okay. I'm glad to hear it. I'm not happy that it's at the collegiate level either, because I know that is potentially an extremely traumatic experience to have to go through again. So, but I'm glad the policy doesn't have that. The other question is much less high level. It's much more just trying to make sure that I understand what the board's role in potentially reviewing under this draft policy complaints, if there is an appeal, how that would change relative to what we're doing today under our current policies if there is an appeal.
That is a very good question. So the appeal process does start on page 16 of this policy. Right. And the notice of appeal is given to the Title IX coordinator. It outlines what the bases for the appeal could be, which could be a procedural irregularity, new evidence that wasn't considered, or that the Title IX coordinator, an investigator, or decision maker had a conflict of interest or bias. So the notice of appeal is given to the Title IX coordinator, and then the appeal decision maker gives parties the opportunity to submit a written statement in support of or challenging the outcome, reviews the additional evidence that's been gathered, and issues a written decision, providing the written decision simultaneously to both parties. It's not clear under this policy who it is that handles those appeals, and that's under the new Title IX portion that's been added. I believe the appeal process that the board has used in the past would still apply in the non-Title IX cases, which is it would go to the superintendent would make a decision, and then that could be appealed to the entire board that could take action based on the record, or if the board wants additional information to request additional information from the parties.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like there's a strong difference under the Title IX portion of the policy from really what it is now.
No, it does do an interesting job, and I think it does do a good job, the new policy under Title IX, of laying out these are the bases on which you could appeal, rather than just I disagree with the decision. So I do think that that's helpful to provide that guidance to both anyone who is a party to a Title IX complaint and to the board.
Okay, thank you. Those were the main questions that I had. Other things were language that you have to read very, very carefully to get it right. There's at least one paragraph that's several lines long that is in fact just one sentence, and it took quite a ways to wade through that, I think. Are there other comments from anybody on the board on this one? So given the timeline, my understanding based on your description, the Office of Civil Rights is requiring that these policies be in place by August 14th and that the staff be trained on them by the start of the new school year. So basically our only meeting between now and August 14th is now, right? And that's the basis for your recommendation that we're moving forward, we would move forward to second reading.
That's correct.
And as you said, and it's correct, of course, we can always come back to the policy if at some point we determine that it's not working effectively in the way that the board would like it to work, we can come back to this. But by adopting the VSBA model policy with only the very minor changes that I see from that, we're still going in the same way as the benefits of doing that with all of the other policies accrue here as well. So, okay.
I would agree with that. Yes, sir.
All right. Unless there's any comments or questions anyone has, if someone would like to make a motion, we can go forward. Ms. Downs.
Chair Anderson, I move that the school board waive first reading and approve second reading and adoption of policy GBA/JFHA prohibition against harassment and retaliation.
Thank you, Ms. Downs. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. All right, then Ms. Goodell.
Yes, hi. Dr. Anderson,
Yes.
Dr. Dimick,
Yes.
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
Ms. Litton,
Yes.
Ms. Russell, not here, and Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So our next agenda item is our future agenda topics, and there is an item on here that that I'd like to suggest the board take as a future agenda item for our work session in a couple of weeks, and then we can talk about any other items that folks have. But you know, it's the beginning of with school coming on, and our school board advisory committees they're ready to get back to work and start tackling questions. I'd like to suggest that the board at our work session in a couple of weeks come together on some common questions, a small number, 2 or 3, that the board would like input from as many of our advisory committees as each question applies to, all of them ideally, but that will help us make decisions on things at the board level. So effectively giving our advisory committee, in addition to their their charter that sort of specifies their reason for existing and that they do exist and how they work, but what would be topics we'd like them to give us input on this year. And I don't know that I want to suggest we spend time trying to brainstorm what those questions might be here. That would I'd like to suggest for the work session in a couple of weeks, but I'd like to get a sense of if people agree that this is a topic that we'd like to ask the committees to take on. And I would ask the members, and then I think, Dr. Nina, I'd like to hear what you think, if this would be helpful from your perspective. So open it up to questions from members. Is this something we'd like to do? Dr. Dimick.
Thanks. So having chaired one of these committees before and sort of gone through the process of joining the committee, not really knowing much, and then being on it for a long time and realizing, oh, well, I could try to get our committee to do something. I think it could be useful to pose questions of our advisory board, or think of boards, or think of ways that they can be helpful to us and use them perhaps more than we've done in the past. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Ms. Litton.
I mean, I think it's worth a discussion. I think it makes sense if we actually have some things we want to find out from them. I don't think we should just kind of make them up to give them something to do if we're just making them up. So, you know, I think it's worth the discussion. If we don't come up with anything, I think we should be okay with that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Any other thoughts? Dr. Noonan, is this something that you think might be even helpful perhaps to the board and staff simultaneously?
The short answer is I think so. And yes, and I only say that from experience, having worked in other school divisions where committees of the board were given charges by the school board that were developed by staff. And we don't have to do it that way. I would want to work alongside of you to help develop those charges if that's helpful. But inevitably each year there was something that was going on that we wanted some help from each of the committees around. So my initial instinct, and I don't want to taint the waters or anything like that, but we're in the middle of a global pandemic. So who better to help us with the global pandemic when thinking about how to provide daycare for our most needy families than our daycare advisory committee, or who would be more helpful to help us think through, school safety and PPE than the Health and Wellness Advisory Committee, or, so I just think there are inevitably things during the year that those committees could really give us some good information on that would actually be helpful in some ways furthering the work that you all are trying to accomplish. So from where I sit, I will tell you, just in my short years of experience here, that when it comes time for the advisory committees to come forward to give their reports for the year, I'm never quite sure what they're going to report on, because we have the staff liaisons and we have the school board liaisons, but it would certainly be helpful if there was a common charge, or maybe not a common charge, but everybody had a charge that they could all be working on that would be appropriate for their committee, in addition to the other things that they would like to do. So just create some continuity and some cohesiveness, I think, between and among those committees and the schools. So that would be
Okay,
my
thanks. Yeah, I mean, the reason that I bring this forward is certainly what could we learn, and what could each of the committees help us with related to the pandemic. Another one is what could each of the committees help us understand better on our equity work across the division, and what each of one of the committees may have. So, all right, well, if there isn't an objection, I'd like to suggest that I'd like us to go ahead and put this on the agenda for the 25th as part of the work session, and ask folks to think about what questions might make sense. In the end, we still have some time. Maybe our September meeting would be a time where if after a discussion on the 25th, there is a desire to do this and we've got some ideas of what the questions are, maybe on the 8th of September would be a time we could look at what charges might actually go out and take action at that point. But not seeing any objections to having it being on the 25th. Why don't we go ahead and do that? Okay. Are there any other future agenda items that anyone wants to bring up at this point? Mr. Webb.
Just a quick question to see if we've come up with a time frame of talking about the equity area for a work session yet.
September was the time that we had in mind for a work session on that.
Okay.
And Dr. Noonan, one thing that occurs to me is that it'd be good to make sure that we bring in student voice into that discussion to the best degree that we can, figure out the right way to do that. So we can talk some more about how that might work.
Yeah, let me meet with the team. They've been putting the presentation together already and have done quite a bit of legwork. So let me work with them a little bit.
Okay.
Thanks.
Ms. Downs.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Can you refresh my memory? Did we put the school calendar on a future agenda as a future agenda item?
So the process for the school calendar this year would basically be what we had done in years prior to last year. So traditionally, the staff would come forward to us with some, they would be doing work on developing some calendars, and then they would be coming forward to us with some calendars for us to discuss and take action on. We haven't scheduled a specific agenda item date for a work session on that, but that's sort of what the process would look like.
Yeah, I think, and granted, I know everything that's going on, and Dr. Noonan and his staff have a lot to deal with. But I think one of the things we had talked about was perhaps setting that calendar earlier so families plan, even maybe considering doing 2 years at a time. So, maybe just a discussion topic for, the next couple weeks. And again, I know that things are tough right now trying to get her. So I'm not saying right now, but I'm just saying, I don't want to put it off too long. So thanks.
All right. And I saw, Dr. Dimick, you had your hand up.
On the calendar, I would love to talk about doing a 3-year calendar, maybe one that we revisit each year, but something where people have more certainty planning. I think DC does a 3-year calendar, my university does a 3-year calendar, and I'd be happy to hear arguments for not doing a 3-year calendar, but it seems like we reinvent the wheel each year. So.
Okay.
I think that that would be a good topic to bring to a work session, because there are some issues with doing multi-year calendars when it comes to testing windows, not knowing when those are from year to year, and the like. But perhaps we could, I think the direction we would want from the board would be, do you want us to do it early, and do you want us to do a multi-year calendar? I think those are the two questions that we would like to get some answer and clarity to.
So, Dr. Noonan, why don't we talk a little bit about what scheduling might make sense for that discussion? But I take your point, Ms. Downs and Dr. Dimick, about the desire to have that happen earlier, and also sort of a longer lookout than what we had done in the past, which was year by year. So, but we'll work on figuring out a scheduling, given other things that are going on. Is that okay with the members? Okay then. Any other future agenda items? You can tell I'm writing things down to make sure I don't lose track. So, all right, not seeing anything else at this point. Why don't we go ahead and Dr. Noonan will go forward to your report.
Great, thank you. I really don't have a whole lot this evening. I think I've updated you on just about everything that we've been working on. Hence the time. The last thing that I didn't mention this evening that I wanted to mention is the Summer Parent Series that has been put on. And I want to just send a real big thanks out to Rebecca Sharp and the Student Services team who've put together some really engaging and popular online sessions for parents, ranging from talking with elementary students about COVID to helping tweens with stress and getting ready for middle school. But the last two summer series will be next week. So thanks to Rebecca, or this week. So thank you to you and your team. And I know you wanted to maybe chime in just to say thank you to a couple other people who helped put some of this together as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a big thanks especially to our social workers and to our behavior specialists and to our counselors and our school psychologists. They've all really been working all summer to provide small groups to our students and continue with one-on-one counseling for our students. And a big, huge shout out to our teachers who really stepped up to provide a variety of different activities and clubs that students could sign up for to really promote that social emotional well-being and connectedness that kids need. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of them and thank them.
And then the last thing I would just say to you is that we will update you within the next couple of weeks or next week probably about what our enrollment is looking like. We are tracking and seeing quite a number of folks who've decided to provide homeschool until such time as we're back to some sort of hybrid, or in some cases just back completely. I think it's worthy of just mentioning to the board that I have great concern about people that are pulling their children out of the school division at this time for whether it's private opportunities or doing some things where they're bringing in tutors and asking them to pay and finding private solutions, simply because that has a bottom line impact to our school division, because we are funded based on the number of students that we have in our schools. And there could be, depending on how many students do leave during this period of time, a need to do a reduction in force. There may need to be some other reductions that need to be taken depending on how many people are leaving. And so that's kind of connected a little bit to a comment that I made in my Road to Reopening several weeks ago about the notion of podding. And I had sent it ahead of time to all of you. And I just want to be really clear that we as a school division can't support potting. Nowhere did we say don't do potting. We said that we would prefer that you didn't do potting because we think that it could create some COVID spread or whatever, but we never said don't do potting. But I think where things could really go south for us as a school division is if people start potting, pulling their kids out of school, and then hiring somebody to take care of that pod, then we're losing resources in our public schools that could have a long-term impact. And if those people are planning to come back, I just want folks to understand that if you pull your resources out and decide to come back, when you do come back, it may not look the same as when you were here because the resources have changed. And so I just put that as a pin, put a pin in it or a marker, because we are tracking the number of kids that are leaving for homeschool options. And what I understand is that in some cases, those homeschool options include private tutors to work with pods of kids in homeschool scenarios. So that's it's a little bit unnerving to us in the public school sector. And Rebecca, did you want to follow up with that a little?
Yeah, homeschooling comes through my office as well. And one of the other things that, when we're getting the letters, that's that I hope that parents understand is that I think sometimes they're making this choice because they see that they saw the sample schedules and think there's not flexibility. And, and I hope that parents listened to our principals tonight and understood that there would be a lot of flexibility in the scheduling, for their students. And that I think that's one of the other reasons that we're seeing some of the increases, because I reach out to them because all of those requests, they go to Dr. Noonan and then they get fielded through my office with my staff, and we really look at those. And and I've had several parents reach out to me, and the reason has been because they were concerned about the schedule. And so I hope that that families heard that tonight, that there is flexibility there for families, that homeschool, you don't have to homeschool because you're worried about the scheduling. I hope if that's clear.
Great, thank you. That's it for me for my update tonight. Thank you, Chair Anderson.
Thank you, Dr. Noonan, and thank you, Ms. Sharp. Is there any question for Dr. Noonan on the report? Dr. Dimick, and then Ms.
It isn't a question, it's just a big thank you. In talking with family in other parts of the country who are in California going back to school and not knowing a week out from starting school, whether it's going to start, whether it's going to be a hybrid in person, finding out a week out that, oh no, you're not going to be in hybrid, you're going to be online, and well, maybe we'll start a week late. And a family member who's a special ed teacher 2 weeks out of school, not knowing what it's going to look like again, and then finding out, well, it might not start on time, and well, it might be a couple weeks, and it's not going to be in person, and just very poor communication from their school systems, and such uncertainty for both, for students, for families, and for teachers. And I'm grateful that we have a plan in place, and maybe it doesn't make everyone happy, but I think it's what we're doing is the right thing to do, and it gives everyone at least some certainty as to what school will look like when it starts. So thank you very much. Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dimick. I'll just take a second to say I am more than certain that you spoke very well for all of us just now. So thank you for that. Ms. Downs.
I hate to ask a question now because you all had these nice closing comments, but I completely agree with Dr. Dimick. I still see headlines pop up on my phone that schools are changing within a week of school starting, that they've gone online. I just can't imagine how difficult that is. So thank you all for your planning. Dr. Noonan, I just had a question. In terms of the enrollment drop, do you think the public, our community, understands about the piece about losing funding? And, then if people come back, there could be a reduction in workforce, and then people coming back, and now things there may not be the teachers they remembered or what have you. I mean, do you think that those connections are being made in the community?
No, I don't think they're being made. I actually was thinking about writing an op-ed at some point about pandemic flight. And I don't know that it's being made. I did put out a tweet over the weekend about it, just saying, hey, just think about the divestment of your of what you're doing, the divestment in public education. And I think some people thought it through, but most people were like, what are you talking about? So I would say there's not all that connection is
right. And that's, I saw that tweet in some of the responses. So I was curious, you know, because I think it's hard to explain in a tweet how that does affect things down the line. So, I mean, I think it would be great, you know, in terms of, I find it was educational for myself to just hear you talk about that. So, you know, at some point, I think helping people understand that those actions do result in, you know, possible negative damage to our school system. So thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions? If not, Dr. Noonan, I would ask that you keep us up to date on these numbers because, right, the issue of I understand the motivations that people have in making this choice, but the effects that it has on lowering our enrollment and our ADM and the impacts that has on the budget and then the staff to support the students, and when if students leave and then we don't have the support capacity to support the students when they want to come back, the effects that has. I see that as a real concern. So I'd like to ask that you keep us up to date on that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then we'll go ahead and move on to board and student liaison comments, and I will just go in alphabetical order because otherwise I will miss somebody because I'm thinking about things. So I'll start with Dr. Dimick and then go from there. So Dr. Dimick, I don't know if you have any comments that you'd like to make.
I don't have anything.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Downs.
Yeah, I'm the liaison with the Mason PTSA and spoke with Mary Asel. She and the other PTA presidents had a meeting, and they are working on ways to help the principals in terms of that social emotional connectiveness, you know, so they're aware of, you know, to work that they really are trying to help the principals with doing whatever they can outside of the school hours to connect students.
Thank you. Ms. Litton.
I don't have anything tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Ms. Russell has left. So Mr. Webb, anything from you?
No comments for this evening.
Okay, thank you. I will just let everyone know tomorrow night, Ms. Russell and I will be participating in a discussion that's hosted by the Falls Church GOP on the topic of why is school opening in virtual mode and what are some of these, what is a pod, apparently, something like that is the title. So we'll be there tomorrow night, and it will be an opportunity for us to talk about some of what we just talked about, but also for people to have questions. It'll be on Facebook on the Falls Church GOP Facebook page. It's I gather the next one in their series. So we'll be having that conversation tomorrow night, starting at 7:30 for those who are interested. And my only other two other report items. One is I did attend the Chamber of Commerce meeting this morning, and you know, the business community still is struggling as we all know, and in Falls Church having support of our local businesses would definitely be appreciated. They've been good partners with us. And the other question I think that I just want to make sure came out of that one is making sure that as we're bringing staff back, that we're giving them the same sorts of information that we have been giving them in the past about Chamber of Commerce and about businesses. So that came out of the conversation. So I think that's all that I have on my mind at the moment. So I don't know if there's anything else. Otherwise, we have some minutes that need to be approved, and so we'll go on to that. All right, so then our next item 11.01 is approval of the minutes from December 10th, 2019, and I would seek a motion regarding the minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Webb, and then we'll go on. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the minutes as presented.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
And we'll give that to Ms. Litton and say thank you. All right, then Ms. Goodell.
Yes. Dr. Anderson,
Yes.
Dr. Dimick,
Yes.
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
Ms. Litton,
Yes.
Ms. Russell isn't here, so Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more set of minutes for the meeting of July 28th, 2020, and I would seek a motion on that one as well.
I'll do it. Mr. Chair, I move that the school board approve the minutes of December 10th, 2019 and July 28th, 2020 as presented.
All right, we just did December 10th, so we'll go ahead and just take that chunk out and then
Sorry.
if you don't mind moving that.
Oh yeah, sorry. Do you want me to read it again? Or are we good?
Please go ahead.
Sorry. I move that the school board approve the minutes of July 28th, 2020 as presented.
All right, thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you.
Who was that?
I'm not actually sure.
I think that was me.
Oh,
All right, so
I
thank
think
you,
I
Ms.
beat
Downs.
Dr. Dimick on that one.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right,
Go ahead, Mr. Downs.
Dr. Anderson,
Yes, thanks.
Dr. Dimick,
Yes.
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
Ms. Litton,
Yes.
and Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. I think the only thing that helps me figure out who it was is which box lit up first, and that sort of did that. But anyway, all right. We have no meeting materials for board review, and so the only thing left on our agenda is to adjourn. So, thank you all very much for our meeting tonight, and thank you again, Dr. Noonan, to you and your staff for the amazing work that you've been putting forward. And we stand adjourned.
Thank you.